Infiltrating the pirate flagship wasn't difficult. Their security was sloppy, basic motion sensors, outdated cameras. Child's play compared to the research ship. Well, they're pirates, I thought. They're used to stealing, not guarding. The implant beneath my chin picked up steady vibrations. The ship's reactor wasn't far. I sprinted down the corridor. For a military vessel, the place was a mess. Walls patched with mismatched panels. Boxes of plunder stacked like garbage. It reeked of rust, oil, and stale blood. Then I felt movement. Two of them. One human, one insectoid. Let's end this quickly. I crouched behind a stack of crates. As they approached, my tail extended silently and struck. KH. A wet sound, a spray of blood. The human's head snapped back, severed cleanly. The insectoid froze, staring at the corpse. He was fast to recover, reaching for his communicator. My blade-tipped tendril shot out, wrapping his wrist and digging in. Kaya! Flesh shredded. The communicator hit the floor, useless. I reeled him in, my tendrils dripping with green blood. It had a sharp, sweet scent. Tastes like grapes. Human blood had a metallic bite. This was refreshing, almost fruity. No time to savor it. I lunged, slamming him into the wall. Kokek. Bones cracked. His body twitched violently. He was tough, even for an insectoid, but not tough enough. My lower limbs pinned him, my upper tentacles clamped around his head. Spare. I tightened my grip until his plea ended in a wet pop. The corridor splattered green. I ignored the human corpse and tore into the insectoid, devouring him quickly. As expected, unplayable species don't count. In the game, insectoids were technically sentient, but NPC-class life forms didn't trigger evolution. Disappointing. I swallowed the last of him and cleaned the floor with my tongue, then shoved the human body into a nearby box. A voice crackled from the fallen communicator. Patrol team, report. Why no response? It's fine. Then answer, idiot. Get out of there. Sorry. Thanks to my mimicry ability, my voice was indistinguishable from the insectoids. The connection cut. They were none the wiser. I continued toward the reactor. No resistance. But as I approached, I saw them, android guards. Heavy frames, glowing optics, polished armor. Real security, finally. Androids. Of course. Killing them wasn't the issue. The moment I did, they'd transmit an alert to the ship's AI. That would trigger full lockdown. I wasn't ready for a siege yet. Think. The organ beneath my chin pulsed as it scanned their patrol patterns. Androids had few weaknesses. Their thermal sensors made sealing movement impossible. I don't have to fight them head-on. I backtracked through rusted stairways and crooked halls until I reached what looked like a bedroom. The stench was unbearable. Sweat, alcohol, decay. Empty bottles rolled on the floor. I flipped the mattress with all four hands. Insects scattered. Perfect. I stood in the empty space and released spores from my lower arms. The acidic secretion hissed, eating through the metal floor. Thick smoke rose as the deck corroded. Beneath it, the reactor's upper structure came into view, glowing faintly. An android might detect motion, but not corrosion. They were slaves to logic, blind to chaos. Let's burn the heart from above. I funneled the spores downward. 10 years of piracy had hardened Elchin Devara to almost anything. A Hulk mutant who had cheated his engineered 2-year lifespan. He'd earned a reputation among the space scavengers as both brutal and clever. But what he saw now chilled even him. Request for assistance. This is command. The intruder is breaching the door. We're out of men. Where's the captain? Dead. Everyone's dead. Smoke grenade. It's inside. Aya. The recording ended in screams. The hologram flickered out, leaving silence. Elchin's jaw tightened. The research ship he'd boarded was wrong from the start. There were no bodies, no bloodstains, just strange organic residue crawling along the walls, as if the humans here had been erased. He had his crew dig through the ship's data logs. What they found was that final recording. Soldiers torn apart by something unseen. Play the previous file, Elchin ordered. The screen showed soldiers moving through narrow corridors, guided by a man with cropped hair, likely security detail. Behind him, a few well-dressed officers, including Captain Samuel. Then came the attack. A blur of motion. Soldiers screaming. The creature appeared. Fast, black, and shifting. It didn't just kill. It hunted. The lead soldier fired a plasma pistol, and the creature reacted instantly, retreating behind a smokescreen before striking again. Elchin leaned forward. "It's intelligent," he muttered. "Not a beast. Something strategic. The way it calculated, the way it adapted, it was alive in a way machines weren't." The soldier fought bravely but died to friendly fire. The creature vanished soon after. When Elchin accepted this job, his only concern had been Megacorp's retaliation. Now, his worry was surviving long enough to report what he'd seen. "Garlic." "Yes, boss. They lost contact just yesterday." "Yes. We were supposed to meet them then. The ship never showed, so we came looking. There had been 222 crew members aboard. Now, not one left. The problem isn't the dead," Elchin thought. "It's what killed them." He knew how this kind of creature operated. Smart, flexible, patient. Attacking without intel would be suicide. Still, he smirked. "We're lucky. Sir, it doesn't know we're here." They had boarded quietly, no alarms triggered. Unless the thing had eyes everywhere, it wouldn't know. "Let's find it first," Elchin ordered. "Then corner it." Before Garlic could reply, a crewman burst in, pale-faced, clutching a comms unit. "Boss, the engine's gone. Completely fried." "What?" Elchin snatched the device. His voice thundered through the room. "Explain." "The reactor's corroded, sir. Metal's melted like acid. No way to repair it." "Damn it." He turned to Garlic. "Can this ship still move?" Maybe yes it can." Elchin grabbed his rifle. "You two help Garlic. The rest with me. We're going after that thing." He stormed out, fury echoing down the corridor. "He's angry," I thought from the nest. Good. I could feel his pulse through the ship's hull, fast, erratic. The entire crew was moving. They'd start splitting up soon. That's when I'd strike. They didn't know there were still survivors aboard. About 20 of them, hiding. Megacorp soldiers and the pirates would tear each other apart. All I had to do was wait and harvest what was left. But that woman... In the command room, one human stood apart from the rest. Calm, focused, surrounded by 3 guards. My instincts hissed. Danger. Could she be Si-Hyun Yujin? The one Arnold mentioned, the one like me. If so, she wasn't ordinary. The Yujin family were known for pushing human modification beyond reason. Even among Megacorp elites, their obsession with perfection was legendary. Another monster, I thought. Interesting. If she was enhanced, I wasn't ready for her. Not yet. Let's finish the pirates first. Once they were gone, she'd be next. Down below, Elchin and his crew were approaching the captain's quarters. The survivors were waiting there, armed and desperate, and I was waiting above them all. Normally, this would have been a time for celebration. Loot on deck, laughter echoing through the halls. But no one dared to speak. Elchin Devara, their boss, stood fuming like a cornered beast. The loss of his battleship had pushed him to the edge, and everyone knew it. He was barely holding back his rage when a trembling subordinate approached. "Boss!" "What?" Bioscanner picked up life signs. "In the captain's quarters. And the door's sealed. We'll need to breach it." Elchin glared. "Do you need my permission to breathe too?" "And no, sir." That was all the permission they needed. The demolition team hurried into position. The man with the plasma cutter set up the device, connected it to the terminal, and the beam ignited, green light slicing through 50 centimeters of reinforced alloy. Smoke filled the corridor. The moment the seal broke, gunfire burst from inside. "Damn it, take cover." The first pirate's skull split open before he could react. Bullets tore through the doorway, forcing the rest to duck behind the walls. Then Elchin moved. Out of the way. He walked straight into the hail of fire. Rounds sparked off his skin without leaving a mark. Unless you hit him with a plasma launcher, a Hulk mutant didn't bleed. He grabbed the door frame and twisted. The heavy metal warped like dough in his hands. Then he stepped inside and began the slaughter. AR, monster! Every punch from Elchin turned a man into meat. The pirates behind him fired blind into the room, adding to the chaos. In seconds, the captain's quarters were painted red. Only one survivor remained, a man in a torn medical coat. Wait. I surrender. Surrender? Elchin growled. The Dvara cartel doesn't do that. I am the ship's medical officer. I could be useful. Elchin paused, lowering his fist. Medical officer, huh? Yes. Yes. The captain's missing, but you're here in his quarters? The man's silence was all the answer Elchin needed. His irritation deepened. The ship was wrecked, the crew dead, and the captain gone. He considered crushing the medic's skull, then thought better of it. You're a smart one. You must know where the bodies are. Yes. That noble's corpse, Kaisaraji Eugen. They said it was here. Where is it? The medic hesitated. He didn't know, but lying felt safer than telling the truth. It's with a monster. Elchin's brow twitched. The monster again? Why the hell would it be carrying corpses? It eats people. That silenced the room. Elchin exhaled sharply and turned to his crew. Listen up. The doc says the monster's got a body. We don't have time to search this whole ship, so split up. Groups of 6 minimum. If anything happens, report immediately. Anyone slacking off, I'll smash their skull myself. Yes, boss. You. He pointed to the medic. You're with me. The crew scattered, and the medic bit back the truth he'd almost blurted, that the creature could imitate human voices. Hey, Doc, Elchin said casually. You're a pirate now. We've been short on medics. Oh, of course, boss. You know anything about genetic modification? Yes. Yes, leave it to me. The chance to warn them slipped away completely. Too bad, I thought from the shadows. The crew didn't last long. No surprise, given their opponent. Hulk mutants were living weapons, built to tear through tanks and mechs. Against someone like that, survival was a miracle. Only one lived, the medic. I didn't need to see him to know. Medical officers always got special treatment in high-risk crews like these. It didn't matter. None of them were leaving this ship alive. Still, the outcome was perfect. They're scattering, except for the boss and one bodyguard. The rest split into search parties of 6. Their movements were disciplined, too clean for ordinary pirates. Probably ex-military. Good. That made them predictable. Time to hunt. I was about to move when a familiar pulse echoed behind me. Hey, baby, let me come too, duh. No. Why not? I want to help. Number 26 looked up at me like a child begging to tag along. I sighed and lifted the little one onto the nest, but it crawled right back after me. Determination radiated from its tiny, glowing body. Fine. Apart from the boss and that strange human woman, the rest wouldn't be difficult. 26 needed combat experience anyway. Better it learn while I was still around to protect it. Be careful. The enemies are scary to... Yeah, you too, kid. 26 hopped onto my shoulder. I couldn't even pretend to be angry. For groups, armory, mess hall, cargo bay, and lab. Their goals were obvious. I chose the armory first. If they secured working weapons, things could get messy. We moved. The pirates reached the armory just as I did. 6 of them creeping through the overgrown corridor. What the hell? Plants all the way to the door. Cut him down so we can set the plasma cutter. They drew their machetes, laughing nervously. They shouldn't have. A pirate slashed a pod open. It burst, spraying them with viscous fluid. What the? Ugh, looks like he never finished. His skin melted, his jawbone sliding off. Another pirate collapsed, muscles paralyzed by neurotoxin. They gave me the perfect opening. I charged. It's him. The monster. He looks different. Of course I did. The footage they'd seen was outdated before my latest evolution. They didn't know a thing about me. I grabbed one by the chest and squeezed. His insides burst like fruit pulp. The others opened fire, their weapons blazing red across the corridor. Plasma flared against my hardened carapace. If I hadn't evolved the exoskeleton trait, that might have hurt. Now it barely singed. I looked like a walking suit of dark armor, a relic from some forgotten war. I kept moving. My upper tentacles shot forward, jagged, saw-bladed limbs that wrapped around 2 pirates and split them in half. One of the survivors, an insectoid, roared and charged, swinging his machete. My tail parried the blow easily. Before I could strike back, 26 leapt from my shoulder. Gore! It latched onto the insectoid's face, dissolving it with corrosive secretion. The creature screamed, trying to claw it off. Not happening. I drove my tail into his spine and injected neurotoxin. His body went rigid, life draining from his eyes. I left 26 to finish him and turned toward the last pirate, the one still yelling into his communicator. Monster! It's here! I was already behind him. For arms pinned him in place. God, wait. I bit down. The skull cracked, brain pulp spraying across my tongue. What? Where are you? I swallowed the brain, activated my mimicry gland, and replied through the stolen calm. It's nothing. Then answer properly, idiot. Sorry. Click. Silence. The armory was mine. Maybe I'll keep the communicators, I thought, picking one up. They might come in handy later. 26 was still finishing its meal, bubbling contentedly. I glanced down at the twitching insectoid and ended its suffering with a quick sting. Then I noticed another survivor, a cyborg from the Star Union, half-body crawling, sparks flying from severed wires. PL, please spare me. Star Union fanatics, always preaching salvation through machinery. I stepped on his head. Metal and brain fused beneath my heel, bursting like wet circuitry. Can I eat that? I tore off the mechanical pieces and chewed the rest. The flavor was strange, metallic heat, like fried oil and static. Not bad. A translucent text window appeared before my eyes. Metamorph, pre-saint, evolution conditions partially met. First intellectual entity, October 10th, complete. Second intellectual entity, 1/10th. Incomplete. Oh, so cyborgs counted as a separate species. Even better. There were 12 aboard. Once I consumed them all, I'd evolve again. Baby, why are you smiling? 26 asked. Something like that. It hopped back on my shoulder, humming softly. Strange, this little creature, called a cosmic disaster by some, was starting to feel like good luck. Like my own personal Santa Claus in the middle of hell.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Crunch. I yanked the throat of one of the pirates with a swift motion. His head, still partly attached to the spine, dangled, brownish blood oozing profusely. This guy belonged to a species called rockwalkers. They were an intelligent species that lived on a planet filled with rocks and metals, sustaining themselves by consuming minerals. While their initial appearance in the settings might have sparked curiosity among science fiction enthusiasts, in the actual game, they didn't differ much from regular humanoids. Except for their skin, which was as rough and hard as stone, everything inside them, including the flowing blood, was just like any other biological being. Using the rockwalker's head, from which blood was dripping, I vigorously struck the head of a nearby cyborg. The cyborg's head became as unrecognizable as a watermelon smashed to bits. That makes it 2 teams. This time, our target was the group heading to the laboratory. Just like the group that went to the armory, they entered the laboratory in a state of complacency. When I arrived, only 3 of them remained. The other 3 had already dissolved into the acidic slime, so I lost 2 of them. I munched on the remaining lower halves of the cyborgs. Just to be sure, I detached one of their legs and tried eating it, but it didn't count towards the evolution condition. It seemed that the text box only recognized those I had killed. Similarly, the predation effect didn't trigger either. The chance of the predation effect occurring on corpses I hadn't killed was quite low. It was almost like sampling, and it didn't seem to count for much. I spat out the steel I had been chewing on. In the game, even a morph could chew on machines, but it was challenging to adapt to it in reality. It felt like chewing chicken bones down to the marrow. Cough, hack, GUH. Next to me, 26 was killing one of the cyborgs. It seemed to have caught on, as it hunted skillfully without my help. Although the cyborg struggled desperately to tear 26 apart to escape, 26 held on to its neck, choking it without moving an inch. Even as a cyborg, at its core, it was still human. If it couldn't breathe, it would die. Before the cyborg's breath was cut off, I destroyed its heart with my tail. As I killed the prey, 26 retreated from the throat and sent a pulse in my direction. Baby, are you hungry? ZZZZZZ. I have to kill creatures like this. Yeda. ZZZZ. Then eat that. All right, enjoy your meal, da. I felt sorry for 26, but I had to kill and eat the cyborg for it to count. I gave 26 to Rockwalker and picked up the cyborg's corpse. Just as I was about to take a bite, the communication device on my combat arm, which I had been carrying, rang. Alive and kicking, you guys. Report. I am in the command center. Still in the middle of work. In the cargo container, these guys seem incredibly wealthy. There's so much stuff to take, it's like a gold mine. Boss, the dining area is in complete chaos. There's not a single edible thing left. We're searching the armory. Why aren't the guys who went to the lab answering? After mimicking the voice of the guy from the armory, I answered quickly and then swiftly bit into the cyborg's body. The small organ structure in my throat mutated quickly to produce a new voice. In a short amount of time, after finishing the mutation, I looked at the communication device that had been lying next to the corpse and replied, "No issues in the lab." You're not the communication officer, right? Why are you holding the communication device? Well, the communication officer is currently preparing for the demolition. Is that so? All right, then click. The boss ended the communication with a suspicious tone. Whoever the boss was, they seemed quite intelligent. It was unusual for pirates to maintain such a systematic hierarchy. Normally, Hulk mutants had reduced intelligence due to the side effects of genetic modification, but this boss appeared to be different. Maybe they've been modified with some technology one don't know about. These smart Hulk mutants were a creature I hadn't encountered in the game. I doubt the original is around anyway. Let's be cautious just in case. Predator senses followed by an intelligent Hulk mutant. The differences from a game keep piling up. It's making me nervous, but also piquing my interest. Come to think of it, there's 26 too. That pink bubble amoeba busily munching on Rockwalker's internals is quite different from its game counterpart. It might be the mascot, but it certainly wasn't as intelligent in the game. I've been wandering around with a bubble amoeba. The community would have been surprised. While Morph were specialized for solo play, I, too, wasn't particularly sociable, whether in reality or in games. Lost in thought, I continued to dispose of the cyborg corpses. The flesh of the newly killed cyborgs had a lemony flavor. Something's off. Elchin raised an eyebrow as he held the communication device. Before becoming a Hulk mutant, he had been a soldier. To be precise, a defeated soldier. He had received the punishment of becoming a Hulk mutant for losing in combat. If the Eden family hadn't taken him in, he would have roamed the battlefield as an intelligence-deprived monster. In any case, being a former soldier, he paid attention to reporting procedures. Some subordinates occasionally disobeyed his orders, but they all became dust in the universe. After a few incidents, the reporting system remained stable. Of course, mistakes were always a possibility, but Elchin couldn't shake his unease. Perhaps it was the influence of the wild animals mixed into his genetics. The instincts that had helped him survive dozens of times on brutal battlefields were warning him now. The recent communication wasn't a mistake, but a trap. Elchin made up his mind and picked up the communication device again. Aside from the team currently conducting the search in the armory, he sent a message to the team that had gone to the dining area and cargo hold. This is the boss. Something seems suspicious with the ones who went to the lab. Get ready, everyone, and head to the lab. Understood. Yes, boss. After ending the communication, Elchin summoned the medical officer. Medical officer, where are the escape pods and the engine room on this ship? Just follow me. Elchin was a cautious man. His subordinates wouldn't lose to creatures like monsters, but this was an unknown situation. Just as on a battlefield, he sought out a way to retreat first. I can't just leave the ones who dared to touch my flagship alone, he thought. Securing an escape route wasn't the end of it. Elchin was planning to plant bombs in the engine room to ensure that whoever had tampered with his ship would be dealt with. Most ships were powered by fusion engines, and even a small bomb could create a massive explosion. Once Elchin safely escaped, he could remotely detonate the bomb, and the monsters would be wiped out without a chance to react. Of course, any remaining crew members on the ship would also perish, but pirates always had plenty of recruits. They could easily replace their losses with new crew members. Garlic and medical officer should be enough. The subordinate who hadn't even considered that their boss might be thinking of abandoning ship was now closely monitoring the medical officer. As the three of them made their way to where the escape pods were located, Elchin called the medical officer. Medical officer. Yes. You fought against the monster, right? Is there anything that could be its weakness? No, there isn't. Elchin furrowed his eyebrows, and he could tell that his subordinate's response didn't sit well with him. The medical officer seemed uncertain about how to handle Elchin's reaction, but he had already spoken his mind. He's reacting like this, even though he's scared of me? Elchin thought. He knew that the medical officer was afraid of him, yet he didn't hesitate to give an answer that Elchin disliked. From the medical officer's perspective, it seemed that this creature was even more terrifying than Elchin. Elchin's mind sank like ice, and he decided to change his line of questioning. Then what are its strengths or traits? Elchin asked. When Elchin didn't show any signs of anger, the medical officer cautiously revealed his thoughts. Well, it's like the creature is a ghost. A ghost? Elchin questioned. Yes, it can capture and consume people even in bright light, leaving no corpses behind. We only realized someone was missing later, the medical officer explained. Where's this ghost on the spaceship? Are you suggesting your people are so incompetent that they can't deal with it? Elchin inquired. Well, this ship has various security measures in place. Even we find it challenging to navigate at times. Yet this ghost managed to move around undetected, killing people. If that's not a ghost, what is it? The medical officer's words left Elchin in silence. Judging by the atmosphere created by the medical officer's words, it seemed he was telling the truth. A ghost, really? What nonsense! Did that mean this ship had become some sort of ghost ship? A ghost ship in the age of space travel. It was no joking matter. After a moment of contemplation, Elchin took out his communication device again. It hurt his pride, but it seemed like he needed to gather his subordinates and take action. But when he was about to change his mission through the communication device, it was already too late. The unidentified enemy had already launched an assault. A clever one. Even high-ranking humans fell for the imitation, but Elchin wasn't fooled. Perhaps the Hulk mutant was more like a clever beast than an intelligent being. It seemed he had noticed the trap through his wild instincts. It's too late anyway. We had just left the laboratory and returned to the nest in the cooling room. Currently, my auxiliary system is monitoring my designated area on the ship. The pirates' movement toward the laboratory is clearly visible. This time, I plan to attack the enemy in a new way. I lay down on the ship in the nest and close my eyes. As my auxiliary system reached my designated area on the ship, my sensory perception, which had been limited to my physical body, gradually expanded. My consciousness flowed through the ship, starting from the cooling room, through the corridors, and into other rooms. The sensory flow that began in the cooling room spread like ripples through the ship's passageways and chambers. People who have used drugs often describe feeling something transcendent beyond the boundaries of their physical bodies. Could what I'm experiencing now be something similar? Every time I breathed, the tendrils trembled, seemingly breathing along with me. The chill I felt from the metal plates that the tendrils enveloped made me shiver involuntarily. Finally, the auxiliary system completed the connection. The enemies were no different from creatures crawling within me. I issued a command to the spores with neurotoxic abilities along the path to the laboratory. Activate. As if issuing commands from my brain to the nerves within my body, the auxiliary system conveyed my orders to the tendrils. The spores responded by expelling their venom in unison. From the ceiling, walls, rooms, corridors, floors, it didn't matter where a highly toxic substance that paralyzed living organisms rained down throughout the ship. I could sense the confusion of the pirates as they grappled with this completely unexpected attack. Desperately trying to destroy the spores and cut down the tendrils to escape, they didn't last long. Their bodies, in defiance of their owner's will, turned into lifeless husks. Some who quickly realized that the spores were the problem managed to escape, but the majority made foolish choices. Success. I had expected to fail, but attempting to control through the link to the nest was only possible after becoming an apex organism. In the game, that is. I tried in the real world, wondering if it might work, and it succeeded. Of course, it wasn't a reckless gamble. There were enough factors for success. The nest was still small, I was familiar with the areas I had already visited, and there weren't many spores. My expectations had turned out to be spot on. The ones who got away are just 5. More than half had fallen victim to the spore assault. The 7 who couldn't escape lay motionless on the ground, waiting for death to claim them. I rose from the nest. The thin tentacles below my chin dropped from the nest, and for a moment, I felt a sense of inertia. It was like the soul that freely roamed the infinite space was once again imprisoned in a body called the flesh. The sense of inertia didn't last long, but the energy expended in controlling the nest didn't return. I felt a strong hunger, a sensation I hadn't experienced in a while. Easy. I'm hungry. Let's go get some food. Yeta. I carried 26 on my shoulder and headed for the laboratory. On the way, I saw fallen pirates. It was typical pirate behavior to mercilessly abandon colleagues who seemed hopeless. It's good for me that I didn't have to fight while hungry. I gnawed on the fallen pirates unceremoniously. With each bite of my teeth, I could feel their bodies twitching. Their movements were as lively as a freshly caught fish flipping about. Did they know? The more they resisted, the more saliva flowed into my mouth. My teeth tore into the enemy's flesh without restraint, and my 4 arms crushed their bones and plucked out their organs. I was so hungry that even machine parts passing through my throat didn't feel repulsive. The silent feast in the corridor had come to a triumphant conclusion. Now, there are only 2 left. Out of 7, 5 were cyborgs. I had already devoured 8 cyborgs, so I needed only 2 more to complete my evolution into an apex organism. I followed the traces of the pirates who had escaped, using one of the cyborg's finger bones as a toothpick. They were hiding somewhere other than the laboratory. It turned out to be the crew's workout room. Of all places, they had to run here. The workout room was a spacious area, so it was probably chosen because it offered a good shooting angle. The problem was that the dead crew members had also acted the same way. The place where camaraderie was fostered among comrades had long become a slaughterhouse at my hands. From behind the broken door, the fearful people inside emitted pheromones and breath. It was clear they were startled as soon as I entered. The sight of walls and floors covered in blood as soon as I walked in must have been quite shocking. More than 20 people had died inside. Adding 5 more wouldn't make much of a difference. I handed the finger bone I had been holding to 26, who was on my shoulder, and stepped inside the workout room. As soon as I entered the workout room, lasers started flying. Lasers couldn't harm me. I walked calmly through the beams, and the pirate cursed at me in frustration. Why the hell isn't this working? Unfortunately, this swearer wasn't a cyborg. He seemed like a regular human from the Megacorp, with no mechanical enhancements whatsoever. He tossed aside his useless laser rifle and pulled out a thick rod from his waist. He pressed a switch, and a blade sprung out from the rod, turning it into a short sword. I stopped in my tracks when I saw it. A sonic blade. The sonic blade was a weapon that incorporated ultrasonic vibration technology. It was easy to carry and had exceptional cutting power, making it a favorite among Megacorp officers. When I didn't move, he must have thought he had the upper hand and yelled energetically, "I'm the fucking vice captain of the Dvara cartel." His previous fear seemed to have vanished. Typical pirate behavior, I guess. It was evident that he lacked both forethought and strategy. The sonic blade could potentially pierce my outer shell, but that only mattered if it could actually hit me. If it couldn't touch me, it was useless. If he were someone skilled in martial arts, it might have been different, but unfortunately, he wasn't. My auxiliary systems confirmed that. He was just an ordinary guy in his early 30s, starting to suffer from adult-onset diseases. His body was filled with blood and fat extracted from the victims he had looted. I lunged at the vice captain. Startled, he tried to stab me with the sonic blade, but his movements were unskilled. The sonic blade isn't durable enough for stabbing. I had no intention of accommodating his foolish attack. I deftly evaded him and kicked him in the abdomen. He coughed up blood and fell to the ground. Damn it! With his internal organs likely ruptured, he didn't release his grip on the weapon. He glared at me with venomous eyes. What a surprise. I had thought he was just showing off, but he was surprisingly tenacious. Regardless of his species, most beings tended to beg for mercy when faced with a fatal wound. This was the first time someone had shown this level of determination since Arnold. Should I end his suffering without pain? I flicked my tail, striking the vice captain's hand. Startled, he let go of the sonic blade, which clattered to the ground. My tail, still curved, pierced through his eye. As his brain was destroyed by the thorn on the tip of my tail, he became a lifeless body, incapable of feeling any pain. 1 out of 5 had died. Now, there were 4 pirates left. The remaining ones didn't seem scared. Perhaps they were hiding in the locker room. I leisurely began to dissect the human corpse. Once I had finished consuming everything and was left with the ankles, a translucent text box appeared in front of me. Predation effect activated. Successfully obtained human nature genetic essence. Extracted human nature from the biological traits of human. Do you wish to apply human nature? Human nature? I was perplexed by a trait I had never seen before. What could human nature be? Based on the name alone, it seemed overly encompassing. Was it referring to human emotions, rationality, or perhaps unique human qualities? It was difficult to discern its meaning from the name alone. Do I need to accept it? In space survival games, there are thousands of different traits, but not all of them benefited the host. For example, the Hulk mutant's Berserk trait enhanced physical abilities, but made the player uncontrollable. There were traits where the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. In my experience, traits with vague and ambiguous names were usually traps. It's a bit disappointing to have just one trait. To deduce the nature of this trait, I recalled the pirate I had killed. He undoubtedly had some unique aspects compared to other prey. A never-give-up spirit. Could human nature refer to an indomitable spirit that got back up even when knocked down? No, I shook my head. It was too early to make a judgment. The world of space survival was far from a place where human values thrived. It was more like a dystopian realm where all sorts of ruthless creatures roamed. The Star Union enslaved people and turned them into machines, while Megacorp genetically modified genes without hesitation, creating monsters. In such a world, there couldn't possibly be a trait that extolled human potential. What should I do? I decided to narrow down my thinking. If the predation effect had been triggered, then this trait would directly affect me. Let's first look at the advantages it offers. Perhaps human nature was a trait that influenced the mind. In that case, it likely fell into the category of enhancing psychic abilities, since most traits related to psychic powers had a strong connection with the mind or telekinesis. These types of traits were not easy to acquire, so having one was an advantage. Now, the drawbacks. This was a new trait, so I had no idea what effects it would have. If it enhanced human emotions, such as ethics or compassion, it would be a negative trait for me. I was an amorph, a species that could only evolve by consuming other beings. If I suddenly couldn't eat human flesh, it would be a significant problem. It wouldn't just halt my growth, it would pose a considerable threat to my survival. The risk is too great. Let's reject it. As I considered canceling the trait acquisition, a faint tingling sensation ran along my jawline. My auxiliary systems were warning me to reconsider my choice. Predator sense? Since this was an unprecedented occurrence, I suspected that my predator sense had been triggered. However, even after waiting, the future foresight effect did not activate. So, this warning was entirely based on my auxiliary systems or an instinct inherent to amorphs. It was ironic that, as a human, I considered human nature unimportant, while my amorph side emphasized its significance. Nevertheless, I couldn't ignore the warning from my auxiliary systems. In the game, I might be an expert, but in reality, I was still inexperienced. If my amorph body hadn't assisted me, survival would have been impossible. Is this really that important? I asked silently, but my auxiliary systems remained silent, the tendrils under my jaw offering no response. Should I accept it or not? I would have preferred to delay my decision, but unfortunately, that wasn't possible. If I didn't accept it, the acquisition would be canceled after 10 minutes. While reality might differ from the game, I had no desire to test it. Let's accept it. After much contemplation, I decided to accept the human nature trait. I intended to fill the psychic abilities category, but since the auxiliary systems granted this trait specifically to me, I couldn't easily dismiss it. My trust in these tiny tendrils that had never forced a risky choice on me before made me choose to believe in them once more. Upon accepting it, the semi-transparent text box emitted a glow and disappeared. And within my body, everything seems normal. There was no sudden rush of strange thoughts, overwhelming guilt, or any other unusual sensations. My body and mind felt the same as usual. I reactivated the text box. Currently, there is one available type for specialization. Psychic Enhancement Type 3/6. As expected, human nature was classified as a psychic-related trait. Now, I had 3 psychic-related traits: Predator's Intuition, Psychic Organ, and Human Nature. To obtain a type, I needed to collect 3 more psychic-related traits. I examined the details of the Human Nature trait. Human Nature assists in making the right judgment at critical moments. Asterisk note: may your choices hold value. Vague. Even after reading the description, I couldn't grasp its effect. I decided that further contemplation would be futile and closed the text box. Let's focus on the fact that we fulfilled the type condition. Regaining my composure, I looked ahead, and there was number 26 waiting for me. Its color seemed off, indicating it might be feeling uneasy. "Hey baby, are you okay?" "ZZZ, why wouldn't I be? You weren't moving, so I got worried." Seemingly concerned about me, just standing there, I gently stroked number 26. It returned to its usual pink hue, evidently relieved. Who's worrying about whom? After picking up the sonic blade the pirate had been carrying, I hoisted number 26 onto my shoulder. Throughout the workout room, there were traces of the pirates scavenging, left in the wake of their fear. Of course, I had no intention of letting them escape. The pirate was cowering inside one of the lockers in the changing room. At first, there were several bursts of laser gunshots, followed by silence. Thinking that the chief engineer had eliminated the threat, he felt relieved. But that wasn't the case. The chief engineer had failed, and the intruder was still alive. A while ago, screams from his colleagues hiding in the shower room had reached his ears. Their cries for mercy didn't last long. The pirate gulped down his saliva and tightly gripped the laser rifle. He couldn't understand why he had to endure such pain. Even though he was a pirate, he hadn't engaged in more heinous or malicious acts than others. Stripping the scalps of the rich or committing crimes against women and killing were common deeds among pirates. He had merely lived as a pirate should. "Lord Subcommander, please have mercy." Since becoming a pirate, he had never uttered the name of the Star Union's Lord Subcommander. He was no longer a cyborg of the Star Union. He was now a member of the Dvara cartel. But as he faced imminent death, he unconsciously acted as he had in his youth. At that moment, the sound of a door opening reached his ears. It seemed like someone was moving something heavy, breaking the stillness of the changing room. The door closed, leaving an unpleasant silence to linger in the changing room. An invisible terror crept into the pirate's chest, making it feel as if cold sweat were pouring down his back. He's inside the changing room. Is the pirate waiting to spring a trap on me? Despite likely being a biological entity, he didn't make a single sound. His inhuman appearance only deepened the cyborg's fear. As he waited for the pirate to emerge, he finally moved when the pirate didn't show up. Thud! Thud followed his footsteps a few times, and then he began opening the lockers one by one. Creak! Slam! The pirate felt like his heart was about to explode. The sound was getting closer. Finally, the man reached the locker adjacent to his hiding place. Through the bars of the locker, he caught a vague glimpse of the man. Brownish skin, closer to black. A beast with teeth stained by the blood of his comrades. There was a strong scent of blood emanating from the man. The man lingered briefly in front of him and then disappeared. As the foul smell of blood drifted away, the cyborg pirate breathed a sigh of relief. He thought to himself, once this looting is over, I need to sneak away. Boss Elchin won't spare me, but the universe is vast. If I escape into the Star Union's territory, even the Dvara cartel won't be able to touch me. While contemplating his escape, a sudden thunderous noise echoed, and he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. When he lowered his head, he saw a long spear piercing through the locker's door and through his belly. The spear, or rather the man's tail, was pulled out of his abdomen and slipped outside. Hey, shouldn't we go too? The boss asked to protect Garlic, remember? Damn, I was happy because he said he'd reward us for it, but damn it. Bridge Command Center. The pirates were debating whether or not to go help the boss. In the eyes of the grumbling cyborg pirates, they saw Garlic working diligently. She was tinkering with the main computer equipped with central AI. Hey, Garlic, how much longer? It's almost done. Why is it taking so long for that pile of junk to do something? It was a humorous situation, but cyborg pirates, despite being half-machine, were total novices when it came to computers and advanced machinery. Like most of the lower-class citizens in the Star Union, he too had focused more on worldly matters than on high-tech fields like robotics, nanocomputing, and the like. Even though it's next-gen tech, it's the AI of the Megacorp battleship. It's practically the essence of space engineering and computer science. It's not going to be that easy. I don't know those fancy words. Let's just wrap this up and go help the boss. The cyborg interrupted Garlic's attempt to provide a detailed explanation with a wave of his hand. Disinterested, the pirates returned to their idle chit-chat. To them, Garlic smiled awkwardly and then refocused on her work. Well, at least she pretended to. In her face, which she had turned, you couldn't find the inexperienced look she had shown earlier. The pupils behind her round glasses were colder than the inorganic masses surrounding them. Arnold did a great job. Thanks to the sacrifice of the minion, she could see that he was evolving. He had appeared in the command center twice. Both times, he had deployed smoke to conceal himself, but she easily read his transformation. Her eyes and spatial perception were far superior, thanks to genetic modifications. Among the genes transplanted into her, there was one called Terror Devil. The Terror Devil was a type of desert-dwelling dragon. Due to the extremely harsh living conditions, this dragon's sensory abilities had evolved in a unique direction. The Terror Devil could comprehensively analyze various factors, such as changes in the surrounding terrain, subtle vibrations on the sand surface, and more, to determine the presence of hidden prey. Its accuracy was nearly 100%, which is why the indigenous people of the planet referred to it as clairvoyance. Of course, it wasn't actually seeing what was hidden behind obstacles, but rather mentally reconstructing what was behind them based on the gathered information. Megacorp scientists concluded that this clairvoyance ability was possible due to innate psychic powers inherent in the Terror Devil's genes. Anyway, she used the Terror Devil's ability to discern that the creature in the video was evolving. When the guy reappeared for the second time in the command center, he had a much thicker outer shell. Her estimate was that he could withstand up to 2 hits. The guy raided the lab midway through the experiment. She was currently reviewing the lab data through the ship's main computer. The computer-literate pirates were oblivious to the fact that she had already completed all the checks a long time ago. He's not just smart. Based on the sample loss report sent by the lab's control AI, she could tell that he had wiped out every last trace without leaving anything behind. He had specifically targeted genetic samples, leaving all other chemicals and materials untouched. That meant he knew exactly what abilities he possessed and how to utilize them effectively. A creature that absorbs genes and evolves. Is that it? She knew of a similar entity, one that shared her kind. Like my own kind. That was her conclusion. The creature, who plundered and utilized the genes of other organisms, was similar to her in that respect. Elchin won't be able to handle this. He was merely a monstrous entity enhanced by the will of others. A paltry being who had no idea what was inside his own body. He could never defeat the mastermind of life who manipulated the origins of living beings at will. She shut down the computer. Somehow, a smile crept onto her lips. She would never admit it, but her expression bore a resemblance to the enigmatic smile that her unidentified enemies often displayed. It was the smirk of a predator circling its prey when it spotted it. That old man in the basement was annoying, but surprisingly, he's been quite productive. When she had her conversation with her faithful servant, Arnold, she had never dreamed of such an exciting turn of events. The death of Noble Capital and Akira Yujin's orders to her, the arrival of the Dvara cartel on this research vessel. Everything had gone according to her plan. But the presence of this creature had been unexpected. "Garlic, are you finished? If you're done, let's go." The pirates called out to her, but she didn't respond. She had no further business with these pirates. When a mission was over, she had to infiltrate another organization that was part of C08. I should reduce the number of genes he can acquire as well. She, too, was an entity that consumed the origins of life, so she understood. She didn't know the exact method he used to plunder genes, but she knew that even if she wanted to obtain genes, she couldn't if there were no traces left behind. She got up from her seat. The timidity that had haunted her until now was nowhere to be found. The woman standing there was entirely different. In place of timidity and gloom, there was now the fierceness and allure that one could feel from a giant feline or a predator. Her former colleagues seemed to sense their impending fate as they hesitated. She slowly removed her inconspicuous glasses. In the Dvara cartel, she was known as Garlic. She had many other names. Her enemies in the Megacorp referred to her as the Spiral Witch. In her family, they called her the Shadow and revered her. The head of the family, Akira Yujin, referred to her as Code White. Once upon a time, her father used to call her Sihyun, the essence of genetic engineering from the Yujin family, the sole heir of an obscure lineage within the family. Sling, drawing a white blade from the back of her hand, Sihyun Yujin smiled as she gazed at the sheep. I silently observed the beast in front of me. The boss, too, opted to assess my movements from his position rather than rush in recklessly. It was a battle of beasts. Before revealing our fangs and claws, we were in the midst of a reconnaissance phase. Much like human combat, the outcome hinged on whose strategy was superior and whose weapon posed a greater threat. Was it due to nervousness or the anticipation of the fight? The acidic blood coursing through my veins seemed to boil, and my skin grew hot. So this is what this sensation feels like. It was a sensation I couldn't experience while playing games. If I were in a human body, I might have licked my dry lips. The opponent's muscles tensed. With just one stomp on the ground, the creature surged towards me, charging as if its prey were right under its nose. A creature of substantial size didn't necessarily mean it was slow. The floor shattered under the force of the creature's punch, and metal fragments scattered into the air. The sight of white shards soaring through the air resembled a flock of startled birds in the wind. Ginning of the battle. Twisting my body to evade the attack, I dove inside the creature. Had my movements felt more agile than expected? Retrieving the fist that had smashed the floor seemed sluggish. I had no intention of showing mercy to the creature. I aimed straight for its belly with my combat arm. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had predicted the opponent's attack. The creature, too, lifted its knee to neutralize my strike. My tail clung to the creature's shoulder, but it chose evasion over blocking. With enough force to leave footprints behind, the creature slammed into an alloy panel. The 3-meter giant was pushed back quite a distance into the air. But the creature hadn't merely retreated. During the exchange of blows, it had secretly planted pulse grenades. When the first attack had missed, I assumed it had stiffened in surprise, but in reality, it was a feint to set up the bomb throw. As soon as I realized this, the grenades exploded, generating a powerful electromagnetic field that swept over my body. Ugh! There was nothing wrong with my body, but the psychic device attached to the back of my head tingled as if I had just eaten something spicy. A pulse grenade was thrown assuming I was a combat android, although it turned out to be incorrect. Not a bad sense. With this level of skill, finding an adversary might prove difficult. TSK. It's not one of Star Union's new weapons. The boss clicked his tongue as if he weren't pleased. It seemed that through our brief exchange, he had come to realize that I was not an easy opponent. Damn, where did this monster come from? The boss cursed under his breath as he reached for the laser pistol at his waist. It was an enhanced laser pistol, but due to his massive build, it looked like he was carrying a slightly longer handgun. After a moment of contemplation, he released his grip on the pistol. It was a wise decision. While it had more destructive power compared to conventional firearms, it was still just a laser weapon. All of his subordinates had laser pistols and had just failed. Since I had confirmed that I was unharmed in the recent exchange, it was reasonable for him to assume that laser weapons wouldn't be effective against me. He roughly swiped his hand through his mane, revealing a switch on the right side of his neck. The Berserk switch. It seemed he chose to trust his own fists rather than rely on weapons. With fingers almost the size of a beer can, he halted just before pressing the switch. "Hey, do you understand me?" It was unexpected. Until now, none of the beings I had encountered had tried to communicate with me, except for 26. They had only left messages like not wanting to die or begging for their lives. I wasn't sure what his intentions were, but he had piqued my interest. I lowered my threatening tail slightly, and in response, he raised the corners of his mouth in what looked like a grin. I planted a bomb in the reactor. The control device is synced with my heart. If you kill me, this ship will explode and everyone will die. A bomb. I glanced at the medical officer behind the boss. His pale complexion and the way he wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve indicated that the boss's words were not a lie. While the bomb's installation was a fact, what mattered was whether the boss would detonate it. He seems quite attached to life. With high intelligence, superhuman physique, and arrogance, there were no elements to lower his will to survive. Without explaining the topic he brought up, he pressed the switch in silence. It signaled the beginning of the transformation unique to Hulk mutants. The arrangement of genes within cells shifted and the body contorted. Bones that should have been inside burst through the flesh and spilled outward, while blood that should have circulated within veins poured out. The surface of the skin emitted vapor due to the inner energy's agitation. Muscles swelled, tearing apart the clothing they covered. This sensation, I've never felt it in a game. Even in his normal state, he looked far from human, but completing the transformation into the Berserk state turned him into an outright monster. Compared to before, his arms had grown much longer. Not only that, but bones protruded from inside and transformed into armor-like shapes that wrapped around his arms, resembling small shields. This bone armor extended to other parts of his body, such as his head and legs. After the transformation, he resembled a gorilla wearing armor more than a human. Near his chest, an exoskeleton similar to mine had developed, providing protection to his vital areas. The difference was that the material covering his chest appeared to be alloy. The exoskeleton that emerged from his back and enveloped his entire chest gave the impression of steel spiders encasing his torso. With bone bursting from the skin, blood pouring out due to the outburst, the abnormally long arms, and more, it wouldn't be wrong to say that he looked like a creation playing tricks on its creator. He's not just randomly messing with genes. Looking at this guy, who is in fact a backward-compatible version of a morph, I guess the genes that went into his body. First, the bone exterior covering his arms, which would likely become his main weapon. I had a suspicion about the origin of this biological feature. It's probably from a mountain crawler. Mountain crawlers were predators that shared their habitat with rockwalkers. They looked like a blown-up version of an armored skunk, about 10 meters in size. Their tough exterior earned them the nickname Rock's Dragon, and they were notorious even in the game. The boss seemed to have selected only the best genes from these Rock's Dragons for himself. He tore off the ragged clothing that had become rags during his transformation. The Hulk mutant, standing at the boundary between savagery and rationality, pounded his chest and roared. Gwa! Rumble! Rumble! A pure, destruction-driven scream echoed, mingling with Amorpha's resonance. My body, too, shivered as I felt the approaching bloodshed and violence under my skin. Come! In the darkness of space, monsters roared, announcing the Betel. The medical officer couldn't blink his eyes. So this is what a beast-fighting arena operated by the Star Union looks like. Two monsters are now facing each other under the watchful gaze of the stars. His new owner, Elchandvara seemed like a machine from hell cast by a demon. Abnormally long and massive arms, aggressively flailing red fur, alloy gloves adorned with dried blood and flesh. There was not a single element that wasn't ominous. A monster daring to confront the machine of hell. His gaze turned to the opposite side. There, a ghost was present, with a color close to black-brown, an exoskeleton covering the head and chest, a mass of tentacles resembling hair, for arms giving the impression of human bones clad in armor, and a tail almost twice the size of the body. The medical officer knew very well how many souls that black ghost had devoured. The dying cries of soldiers before his eyes still echoed in his ears. The machine of hell and the ghostly butcher. The massive and sturdy monster and the agile and tough one rushed towards each other. Every time the creature took a step, the corridor of the ship vibrated. The approaching boss swiftly raised his arms. The bone shield covering his arms flew towards my head to break it. I leaned my head down to avoid the blow, and I shot my tail toward him. Just as my flexible tail was about to pierce his chest, I hesitated. Bomb! Hesitation during battle is strictly forbidden. The boss did not miss my weakness. The shockwave from his rock-hard fist turned the corridor into a battlefield, shattering the lights hanging from the ceiling one by one. What? The boss seemed equally confused as I was. Since the toughest parts of my body are my chest and head, targeting them would have been an effective attack. I had already withdrawn my body. He laughed confidently. He seemed to believe that my attacks were useless and that there were no weaknesses in his body. Considering the current situation, he wasn't entirely wrong. There were many places I could target when a chest attack was impossible. The bone armor surrounding his arms and legs was tougher than my enhanced body. Unless I used a plasma weapon, I couldn't penetrate it. Even if I aimed for the parts not covered by bones, he would do whatever it took to defend himself. But, currently, there were two things he didn't know. One was that I had the neurotoxin glands trait. If I succeeded in stabbing him anywhere on his body, the fight would be over. He already seems to have guessed it, though. The boss is particularly focused on my tail. Even before going berserk, when I aimed for him with my tail, he chose to dodge rather than block it. I'm not sure if it's an instinct from the wild or if he obtained information in the situation room, but he seems to be aware that my tail is dangerous. But what to do with this? He might not know, but I can extract poison from my teeth and claws. If I break through his exterior and attack, I'll win. So, how can I penetrate the tough exterior that the boss relies on so firmly? While the boss is concentrating on my forearms and tail, there is actually one more weapon in my arsenal. The small arms near my chest are holding a thin rod, the Sonic Blade. I picked it up just in case from the gym, but I didn't expect to use it so soon. The Sonic Blade excels in cutting power alone. It might break when I strike the bone exterior, but that doesn't matter. Once I make a wound on the armor, the rest will be no problem. No matter how thick and huge a dam is, it will collapse with a small crack. The moment when fortune smiles upon me is when a crack appears in his iron fortress. That's it. The boss leaped. Thanks to his enhanced reflexes, he jumped at an unbelievable height and lunged at me. I used all 6 of my arms and legs to quickly get out of the way. The place where I was standing was destroyed, and the corridor shook. Fast and strong. He's fast because he has mixed various genes, but his movements are incredibly fast. Even though he's using all limbs except for his small arms to evade, it's still quite close. Usually, fast movements come at the expense of strength, but he doesn't compromise on either. Of course, there's no such thing as perfection. Hulk mutants have a persistent weakness. I have to endure until that weakness comes to the surface. As we rushed through the ship's hull, we entered a massive space. The rusted smell of damp metal permeated the cargo containers. This is the world I first faced when I opened my eyes, a cargo container. All 6 legs strained, and my body soared in height. As I roamed above the containers, shouts from below reached my ears. Arrogant. As if to say that such things can't stop him, he plowed straight into the containers. Rectangular metal blocks weighing several tons each tumbled in a chaotic manner. Grating steel plates on the floor danced in the air in response. Bugs hidden everywhere suddenly appeared in response to the impending catastrophe. After catching a cockroach fleeing, I hid my body behind a container. Facing such overwhelming power, direct confrontation is difficult. The only option I have here is to wait. I'm waiting. I've done more than just run away so far. Hulk mutants consume a lot of energy and have a short rest period in the middle of exertion. If I keep pushing him to use his strength recklessly, even if he doesn't want to, his body will be forced to stop the attack. There's not much time left. The auxiliary unit tells me that the chemical reactions and energy regulation mechanisms occurring inside his body, which are in close proximity, are revealing the optimal timing for my attack. The auxiliary unit tells me that there are 2 hearts in his body, and they regulate their output appropriately. Speaking of which, he has 2 hearts. Where is the detonation device connected? Hulk mutant's main hearts are usually on the left, so it's likely on the left, but he's a wicked monster. I'm not sure which side it's on. While I was briefly distracted by thoughts of the heart, he spotted me and charged. This is bad. A fist filled with unimaginable power, capable of throwing containers weighing over 10 tons like toys, grazed my shoulder. The throbbing pain surged, but it wasn't unbearable, so I immediately retaliated. My tail struck between his joints, like a spear thrust by a master of spear fighting, into the part of his body not protected by bones. Bastard. As soon as I entered the workout room, lasers started flying. Lasers couldn't harm me. I walked calmly through the beams, and the pirate cursed at me in frustration. Why the hell isn't this working? Unfortunately, this swearer wasn't a cyborg. He seemed like a regular human from the Megacorp, with no mechanical enhancements whatsoever. He tossed aside his useless laser rifle and pulled out a thick rod from his waist. He pressed a switch, and a blade sprung out from the rod, turning it into a short sword. I stopped in my tracks when I saw it. A sonic blade. The sonic blade was a weapon that incorporated ultrasonic vibration technology. It was easy to carry and had exceptional cutting power, making it a favorite among Megacorp officers. When I didn't move, he must have thought he had the upper hand and yelled energetically, "I'm the fucking vice captain of the Dvara cartel." His previous fear seemed to have vanished. Typical pirate behavior, I guess. It was evident that he lacked both forethought and strategy. The sonic blade could potentially pierce my outer shell, but that only mattered if it could actually hit me. If it couldn't touch me, it was useless. If he were someone skilled in martial arts, it might have been different, but unfortunately, he wasn't. My auxiliary systems confirmed that. He was just an ordinary guy in his early 30s, starting to suffer from adult-onset diseases. His body was filled with blood and fat extracted from the victims he had looted. I lunged at the vice captain. Startled, he tried to stab me with the sonic blade, but his movements were unskilled. The sonic blade isn't durable enough for stabbing. I had no intention of accommodating his foolish attack. I deftly evaded him and kicked him in the abdomen. He coughed up blood and fell to the ground. Damn it! With his internal organs likely ruptured, he didn't release his grip on the weapon. He glared at me with venomous eyes. What a surprise. I had thought he was just showing off, but he was surprisingly tenacious. Regardless of his species, most beings tended to beg for mercy when faced with a fatal wound. This was the first time someone had shown this level of determination since Arnold. Should I end his suffering without pain? I flicked my tail, striking the vice captain's hand. Startled, he let go of the sonic blade, which clattered to the ground. My tail, still curved, pierced through his eye. As his brain was destroyed by the thorn on the tip of my tail, he became a lifeless body, incapable of feeling any pain. 1 out of 5 had died. Now, there were 4 pirates left. The remaining ones didn't seem scared. Perhaps they were hiding in the locker room. I leisurely began to dissect the human corpse. Once I had finished consuming everything and was left with the ankles, a translucent text box appeared in front of me. Predation effect activated. Successfully obtained human nature genetic essence. Extracted human nature from the biological traits of human. Do you wish to apply human nature? Human nature? I was perplexed by a trait I had never seen before. What could human nature be? Based on the name alone, it seemed overly encompassing. Was it referring to human emotions, rationality, or perhaps unique human qualities? It was difficult to discern its meaning from the name alone. Do I need to accept it? In space survival games, there are thousands of different traits, but not all of them benefited the host. For example, the Hulk mutant's Berserk trait enhanced physical abilities, but made the player uncontrollable. There were traits where the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. In my experience, traits with vague and ambiguous names were usually traps. It's a bit disappointing to have just one trait. To deduce the nature of this trait, I recalled the pirate I had killed. He undoubtedly had some unique aspects compared to other prey. A never-give-up spirit. Could human nature refer to an indomitable spirit that got back up even when knocked down? No, I shook my head. It was too early to make a judgment. The world of space survival was far from a place where human values thrived. It was more like a dystopian realm where all sorts of ruthless creatures roamed. The Star Union enslaved people and turned them into machines, while Megacorp genetically modified genes without hesitation, creating monsters. In such a world, there couldn't possibly be a trait that extolled human potential. What should I do? I decided to narrow down my thinking. If the predation effect had been triggered, then this trait would directly affect me. Let's first look at the advantages it offers. Perhaps human nature was a trait that influenced the mind. In that case, it likely fell into the category of enhancing psychic abilities, since most traits related to psychic powers had a strong connection with the mind or telekinesis. These types of traits were not easy to acquire, so having one was an advantage. Now, the drawbacks. This was a new trait, so I had no idea what effects it would have. If it enhanced human emotions, such as ethics or compassion, it would be a negative trait for me. I was an amorph, a species that could only evolve by consuming other beings. If I suddenly couldn't eat human flesh, it would be a significant problem. It wouldn't just halt my growth, it would pose a considerable threat to my survival. The risk is too great. Let's reject it. As I considered canceling the trait acquisition, a faint tingling sensation ran along my jawline. My auxiliary systems were warning me to reconsider my choice. Predator sense? Since this was an unprecedented occurrence, I suspected that my predator sense had been triggered. However, even after waiting, the future foresight effect did not activate. Overwhelmingly strong, Si-Hyun Yujin was telling me to serve her, to become her slave. Baby, honestly, following Si-Hyun's words would be a rational choice. The blade on her wrist was Galgan's claw, with destructive power surpassing plasma weapons, and even my reinforced exterior couldn't withstand it. Besides that, there are various weapons on her body that could easily kill me. I approached her, using all 6 arms and legs, like a well-trained pet before its owner. That's right. It's the right decision. Don't be scared. I'm here. However, Si-Hyun was overlooking one thing about me. Why I liked Amorph, and why I was immersed in this cheesy, useless character, earning me the nickname Amorph Lover in the community. She didn't know. The reason I liked Amorph was simple: freedom of choice. I loved Amorph because it was a being that could become infinitely stronger through my choices. Therefore, my choice was already predetermined. ZZZ, it's okay. Baby da. When Si-Hyun's face came close enough that I could clearly see her satisfied expression, I narrowed the distance further. I kicked my leg towards her face, using all 6 limbs for balance. She quickly evaded my foot, but that wasn't my intention. I had been waiting for a brief opening. Acidic blood that had been flowing from my torn exterior splashed into her eyes. A momentary gap was all I needed. I couldn't hurt her with acidic blood. It couldn't even harm a strand of her hair. ZZ, hold tight. Yes. While she was momentarily disoriented, I jumped with 20's excess support, using all 6 limbs to run away. I heard the sound of the cargo hold breaking apart from behind. All right, let's have some fun. Ha ha ha. With her eyes closed, Si-Hyun laughed like a maniac. She pulled out Galagon's claws from both hands and slashed the containers as if they were tofu. Let's have some fun. Si-Hyun Yujin was much stronger than me. Indeed, she was my first true enemy since I became a morph. But I would show her that the outcome of a battle wasn't solely determined by strength. Fucking bastards. The wreckage of the cargo container lay in ruins, and within it was Elchin. His auxiliary heart had been destroyed by the attack from Garlic, but he still had one more heart, which kept him from dying. The problem was that his current state was barely hanging on, to say the least. The auxiliary heart played a role in stabilizing mutated Hulks injected with various genes. A Hulk mutant without an auxiliary heart would die shortly. He was an improved being, so that saved him. Otherwise, his body would have been collapsing. How dare you betray me? You damn bitch. I'll make you beg for death. In reality, what made him angrier than the threat of death was the presence of the traitor. He wanted to capture and tear apart that traitor's limbs right away. But there was something else to do first. Damn it. Of all times for the device to malfunction. Even a clever person like Garlic knew that it was a shock trigger detonator, yet she didn't hesitate to break it. As a result, the timer attached to the nuclear reactor had already started. In exactly 10 minutes, everyone on this ship would turn to dust. Do you think I'll die here? Don't make me laugh. Do you know who I am? I'm Elchin Dvara. Even in his paralyzed state, he struggled with all his might. It was his unwavering determination to survive by any means necessary. Baby, are you all right? 26 asked as we ran. I could feel the little guy trembling in his small hand. ZZZZ, I'm already healed. Really? I had the regeneration trait, so I could quickly restore my damaged exterior, which had been torn slightly. There were still injuries on my legs, but the bleeding had stopped. While gently stroking number 26 with my small hand, I contemplated how to attack Si-hyun. A surprise attack will probably be difficult. Her eyes, the terror's eyes, had the ability to see through things. Even if I tried to hide, she would probably see through it quickly. Moreover, from what I could tell, Si-hyun seemed to have an ability beyond just seeing through things. I can feel her presence. Si-hyun had pushed me into a corner where I had to follow her. In that case, I had no choice but to go along with it for now. Let's start by eliminating the negatives. There were 3 disadvantages working against me. The time limit, weaker attack and defense compared to the enemy, and lack of information. I can't do much about the time limit right now. I have to focus on killing her. Information scarcity can only be solved by confronting her directly. If I had been a player who favored other races, I might have been defeated by her, but I was an amorph player. The only people who knew more about the genetic traits than I did were the developers. So what's left is my attack and defense. I considered going back to the control room to devour the cyborg, but that had its own problems. When I evolved to the next stage, my body would be completely immobilized for a minimum of several hours. If the bomb went off or I was discovered during that time, it would be over. I'll have to put my evolution on hold. Oh, thinking about evolution reminded me of something. The psionium. If I consumed psionium, I could use the abilities of Pre-Saint for a short period of time. Si-hyun possessed Galagon's Claw, which allowed her to release a plasma-like energy called Windstorm, commonly known as Sword Chi in the game. I had no resistance to psychic powers right now, so I couldn't count a Galagon's Claw. However, what if I become a Pre-Saint here? If I become an Ascendant, I gain the Psychic Power Resistance trait as an evolution bonus. If she's really Galagon, I'm not sure, but if she only transplanted Galagon's Claw, I should be able to withstand it with my exterior. Plus, I'll gain a long-range attack method. While I have the serrated tentacles, they could only be used for mid-range deterrence at best. Facing off against Si-hyun's Galagon Claw with my tentacles would be inadequate. Moreover, our senses were linked, so if I extended my tentacles recklessly, she could easily counterattack. Pre-Saint's long-range attacks don't have such a drawback. If it were to nitpick, perhaps it consumed more energy. Anyway, I had a fight before the psionium's effect wore off. There was no need to pay attention to energy. I arrived at the lab nest and set 26 down. ZZZZ. Just wait a moment, Dot. Where are you going? ZZZZ. I'll keep an eye on it, don't worry. Little one, it's not okay, Dot. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Don't worry about it. Despite my words, the little one didn't move. It seemed like it had something to say, but couldn't bring himself to say it. Normally, I would have waited until it was ready to speak, but I didn't have time for that now. I left it behind and approached the lab refrigerator. Inside was a violet liquid. I pulled it out and swallowed it in one gulp. Ugh, The searing pain coursing through my body felt as though I was being consumed by flames. Even during the times when they had forcibly administered medication to number 26, the pain seemed far more intense than anything I had experienced before. In the game, consuming psionium only resulted in a buff effect appearing at the top of the screen, but here, it was reality. I had to endure the process of my body being forcibly mutated by the drug. Pain surged from my joints as if someone was forcibly pulling and stretching my bones, and my muscles felt like they were being inflated like balloons, tearing apart. The exterior cover of my body also became significantly heavier. In the face of excruciating pain, I kneeled down instinctively. I almost screamed, but I bit down on my lips to hold it in. I can't pass out from this. How much time had passed? The pain that made me feel like I was undergoing several years' worth of growth pains slowly subsided. I successfully completed the transformation. I got up. Success. Some of the changes in my abilities were visible. The reinforced exoskeleton I gained from the Metamorphosis bonus had upgraded to a monster skeleton. My height had increased significantly due to the overlap with the chitinous exoskeleton trait. I was now slightly over 2 meters tall. The tail had grown longer, nearly reaching 4 meters. And I have horns now. On my head, where the exoskeleton covered, magnificent horns resembling those of a yak had grown. Like the exoskeleton, the horns were made of chitinous material and had been reinforced, making them incredibly tough and sharp. Previously, the exoskeleton on my head had served only to protect my body, but now that I had horns, I could actively use them to charge or stab enemies. When I checked my arms and legs, they appeared much thicker than before. One notable detail was the faint violet shine on the surface of my exoskeleton, the psychic power barrier. While the ability was in effect, a protective barrier that defended against psychic powers enveloped my body. This would shield me against Si-Hyun's Galagon Claw. And lastly, the Thornbone Launcher. My left lower arm had transformed into a different shape than before. Instead of 4 fingers, there were long, rod-like structures below my wrist. They resembled gun barrels and served as a type of biological gun. Just like the contamination organ, I can shoot acidic bones or poison bones. In other words, it's like having a gun that allows me to choose the ammunition I want. Although the number of contamination organs that spit out spores has decreased, unless I specialize in nests, this might actually be an advantage. With that, the inspection of my new abilities was complete. The last thing I needed to check was the time limit. I probably have about 5 minutes left. In the game, the psionium time limit was 5 minutes. It's not much time at all. I need to finish the fight as quickly as possible. Just as I had finished all preparations, I sensed Si-Hyun approaching within my detection range. I linked to the nest and activated all the spores along her path. I needed to drain her as much as possible before fighting. Fortunately, becoming an Ascendant seemed to make spore activation much faster and more accurate than my previous attempts. She's coming. With a loud boom, the entire spaceship trembled. If she encountered the mucus threatening her in the corridor, it should have been destroyed all at once. I disconnected the link and immediately picked up 26, who had been standing next to me. The little one, who had been lost in some unknown worries until a moment ago, suddenly blinked in amazement as it saw my increased size. Wow, the baby has grown again. I'm going to jump, so hold on tight. Wow. I was headed to the location where the bombs were placed, namely the reactor. It was an extremely sensitive area, and even if she had absorbed a lot of genes, surviving a nuclear explosion was impossible. She would find it difficult to fight properly in the vicinity of the reactor. I was running with 26 in my arms when she appeared in the corridor ahead. "Where are you going?" She had coated herself in acidic mucus, leaving her almost half naked, but there wasn't a scratch on her. She pulled out Galagon's claws from both hands as she stared at me. Danger! I quickly threw 26 behind me. I had no reason to feel sorry for it. Her attack had already begun. With a loud noise, a white blade cut through the air, and a crescent-shaped energy blade formed in midair. The blade struck my body with pinpoint accuracy, like a guided missile. It collided with my shield, causing sparks of violet light to fly. And then there was a sizzle at the point of impact. Ugh. There was some pain because the shield didn't completely block it, but it wasn't too deep and I could heal it with my regeneration ability. Oh, Si-hyun tilted her head in surprise. Apparently, she found it strange that I was unharmed. I was just as surprised as she was. I shouldn't be able to see it normally. One of the reasons Galagon's claws were terrifying was that their attack trajectory couldn't be seen. You had to predict where the attack was coming from just by looking at what the enemy was swinging, making it quite challenging. I had never imagined that there might be a function like a psionium organ because I had never encountered an enemy with such an ability in the game. I had gained unexpected information, but now was a fighting situation. I will think about this later. I charged at her. My enhanced legs slammed into the corridor. The combination of type, traits, and evolution status made my charge explosive. Like a missile fired from a silo, my body shot towards Si-hyun. My movements were faster than she expected, and her pupils slightly dilated. I had intended to pierce her abdomen with my horn, but she was no pushover. As she pulled out Galagon's claws from her other arm, she deflected my horn. Ha ha, that won't work. I knew that too. Her posture had slightly faltered, but there was no sign of pain on her face. However, my attack wasn't over yet. With my tail wrapped around her, pinning her in place, my left lower arm aimed directly at her head. Fire! With the sound of twanging piano strings, a spike shot out from the end of the barrel attached to my wrist. The spike was aimed directly at her head, but she hastily used the Galagon's claw to block it just before it could pierce through. Nice try, but not enough to take me down. With those words, she struck my tail with Galagon's claw, anticipating my counterattack. I had already started to retract my tail in preparation. At that moment, her black hair glowed red. Red hair? Wait a minute, could it be? I quickly distanced myself from her, but I was slightly too late. For a very brief moment, less than a second, a drowsy sensation washed over my entire body. As I woke up from what felt like a dream, excruciating pain surged from my tail. I managed to regain my composure and retract my tail, but had been severed by almost a third of its circumference. Wait a minute, that's the ability of the red mist. The red mist was the apex predator that inhabited the jungle-type planets. It resembled a jaguar with red fur and could emit pheromones from its fur that induced hallucinations. On the surface, it might not seem like much, but once you were affected by those pheromones, there was no escaping, making it an extremely threatening ability. The only solution was to keep a distance to minimize the hallucination effect. The white Galagon was as rare as it gets, so I had no idea where she had obtained such genetic essence. You're keeping your distance. Do you know about the red mist? You've piqued my interest. She smiled as if she liked what she saw. She's not an easy opponent, as expected. With the red mist hallucination ability in play, I had to find a way to finish the fight before the psionium effect wore off. When I turn into Metamorph, my long-range attack abilities will disappear. At times like this, I need to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't change anything. The only way for me to win was to patiently look for an opportunity. After confirming that my tail had somewhat healed, I charged at her again. Kaihaha, that's the way to come at me. She laughed as she kicked my arm. As my arm passed through the air, Galagon's claw dug into my chest. Her attack, which was aimed at flipping me over, was thwarted as I twisted my waist. My lower arm hadn't been idle during this time. From the holes between the four fingers, mucus projectiles were launched toward her eyes. No matter how strong she was, it seemed that she couldn't avoid the physiological disgust as she quickly closed her eyes. I didn't let this opportunity slip away. I had been aiming for her shoulder with my sharp horn, but unfortunately, it was a shallow hit. She quickly moved her shoulder, avoiding a deep wound. Do you want to keep playing around? Her hair began to glow red again, and I quickly backed away. While retreating, I launched thorn bones at her as a restraining measure. Tisk! She stopped her transformation, and once again, Galagon's claws were drawn to deflect the thorn bones. Did she just... She retaliated by firing a crescent-shaped energy blade at me. I managed to avoid it by pressing my body against the floor and immediately focused on her. I wonder, there was no visible change. She appeared unfazed, but I could sense an unnaturalness in her expression. I guess she can't use two abilities at once. I had finally found a clue on how to exploit her weaknesses. She opened her eyes to a world that was cold and oppressive. The pressure weighed down on her fragile flesh, and the temperature felt like knives piercing her body. It was a place known to some sentient beings as the Deep Sea, and it was her homeland. Despite the harsh environment, she didn't think her home was all that bad. After all, there were beings there who watched over and protected her. The pink spherical beings like her were the most fragile creatures in the dark and murky world. Because of this, they had chosen a different way of survival compared to the other creatures in the dark, blue world. They formed groups and cared for their young, who were weak and vulnerable. They naturally had social structures that could be classified as families by sentient beings. Of course, with the presence of dangerous creatures that considered her kind as prey lurking in the depths, they always lived under the constant threat to their lives. But she was different. As she grew, she realized that she was not like the other pink spheres. She was special. She possessed an intelligence approaching sentience and a slender tentacle that grew from her body. These were things that her fellow beings did not have. Her tentacles, usually kept inside her body, had the power to ward off dangerous creatures, and they would retreat when she pointed them. She protected her kin using these mysterious abilities. As time passed, despite her young age, she became the leader of her group. While everyone considered her the mother figure, her life remained largely unchanged. Eating together with her kin and sleeping together at night brought her the greatest joy. However, this happiness didn't last long. Creatures descended from above, intending to take her kin away. They were beings with skin tougher and colder than any she had seen before. With claws that seemed like they wouldn't let a single drop of blood flow, they grabbed her kin mercilessly. When she heard the agonizing screams of her kin, she earnestly hoped. She wanted to fulfill her duty as the leader, to protect her precious ones. Did her tentacles hear her prayers? A massive purple energy erupted from the tips of her tentacles, gripping the unyielding beings and contorting them. She thought she had succeeded in protecting everyone, but unfortunately, it was not the case. More beings with cold, tough skin continued to descend from above, capturing the pink spheres wherever they could find them. Once again, she hoped for a miracle, but instead of a miracle, an unbearable sense of powerlessness washed over her. She lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes, it was in a repulsive-smelling liquid prison. There, she witnessed the pitiful deaths of the offspring she was supposed to protect. In that strange, furry creature's arms, she was called Experiment Subject 26. When she awoke in her prison, there were no fellow creatures left. At the bottom of this hell, she prayed. She begged for anyone to help her, promising to dedicate herself to protecting the ones she failed to save if someone would aid her. She made that solemn vow. I had two enemies I found most annoying in the world of space survival. One was the Amorph race, and the other was a Megacorp user who had gone through genetic modifications. What they had in common was that I couldn't predict their abilities at all. Since there was no information about the enemy, even a small mistake could lead to fatal consequences. Therefore, I focused solely on what abilities Si-Hyun Yujin possessed, not caring about how she might be specifically different from a player. In the game, there are no restrictions on using genetic technology. I naturally assumed she would use it as well since she had player-level specs. That was a mistake. In retrospect, Si-Hyun had been fighting with only one ability at a time from the beginning. I had thought it was a bluff, but it wasn't. There was a fundamental limitation on her use of genetic abilities that set her apart from players. You're really getting on my nerves, to the point where I want to kill you. Si-Hyun's tone was colder than before. Perhaps she was trying to be threatening, but it sounded slightly different to me. She was doing it on purpose to avoid revealing her inexperience. I need to find out how long the delay is when she changes traits. Even if she changes her traits quickly, there must be a gap between changing them. That's when she becomes a vulnerable civilian. I needed to change my strategy. I'll go all out. My psionium effect was running out, and at most, I had about 2 minutes left. To win within that time frame, I needed to avoid any serious injuries and trust in my regeneration trait. Like the powerful hind legs of a rhinoceros, my strong legs pounded the ground as I sprinted down the corridor. While running, I kept a close eye on her changing hair. I'm really getting tired of this. The tips of her hair turned red. I targeted her while running with my left arm. If I were human, aiming a shot while running would have been challenging, but Amorpha's enhanced senses made it possible. A bone spike reinforced with chitin shot from the end of my arm, slicing through the air towards her abdomen. PR/N. Changing thorn bone to bone spike. She gritted her teeth and canceled her illusion trait. Almost simultaneously with her hair returning to black, a white blade sprouted from the back of her hand, cutting through the flesh. As I suspected, there's an opening. In less than a fraction of a second, thanks to my auxiliary systems, I confirmed that there was an opening in her defense. She had used Galagon's claws to defend against my bone spike, but I had already reached her. Nice try. Though she expressed annoyance, I sensed an underlying unease in her eyes. As gracefully as a fencer extending a blade, I deftly thrust my tail toward her. However, contrary to my expectations, her response was still formidable. She calmly redirected my tail with her claws, not stopping there. She continued her counterattack, slicing off the poisonous barb at the tip of my tail. Ugh, I had anticipated this to some extent, but experiencing it firsthand was excruciating. It was almost like losing a limb, so the pain was expected. But I couldn't afford to hesitate here. I shook my severed tail vigorously as if I were shaking off dust. The acidic blood and neurotoxin mixed with the injury on my tail, spraying in all directions. Damn! With her tongue out, Si-Hyun switched her trait. Galagon's claw retracted, and parts of her body turned silver. The alloy skin, tougher than the alloy of the ship's hull, protected her from the acidic blood and neurotoxin. I expected her to have a defensive ability, but tungsten alloy skin? The tungsten alloy skin was a genetic trait of the advanced subspecies of metallic gremlins, the Wolfram Goblins. Acquiring this ability granted exceptional defense, equivalent to the top-tier reinforced armor, but it came at the cost of extreme weight gain. As I had predicted, her movements slowed down with the transformation. I used my nails to scratch at the parts that hadn't turned silver yet. Ouch! For the first time, I inflicted a wound on her. Si-Hyun, who resembled a monstrous creature, had human-like red blood. A disobedient brat needs some discipline. She crumpled her face in annoyance and used her heavy foot to kick at my chest plate. Since we had to fight in close quarters, I didn't dodge. The impact felt like being hit by a siege hammer, spreading a heavy shock throughout my body. If I were human, I might have coughed up blood and bits of organs. Despite the fact that my chest plate was one of the sturdiest parts of my body, the pain was far from insignificant. Will this be enough to defeat her? I thought inwardly as I grabbed her leg embedded in my chest. I poured all my strength into my forearms and lifted her. What? She's incredibly heavy, I muttered unconsciously. It was a weight that could make anyone swear. My intention was clear. With her leg in my grasp, I swung it like a baseball bat. My target was the corridor wall, or to be more precise, the wall partially corroded by acidic blood. The impact reverberated throughout the corridor, shaking it as though an earthquake had struck. The wall at the point of impact cracked and split, with molten metal oozing from the fractures. The woman, who had left her mark on the alloyed wall with her face, wore an expression of extreme anger, as if she felt insulted by my actions. She withdrew Galagon's claw and crossed her arms, accumulating an enormous amount of psychic energy that made the white blades on her arms gleam with a vivid purple hue. This is dangerous. The proximity is too close to dodge. I have to block it, I urgently thought, using my forearms to shield my head and chest. As she unleashed her crossed arms, an unprecedented gigantic beam swept through my body. The relatively slender horn on my right shattered, and my arms and legs didn't escape unscathed either. More than half of my right upper arm was severed, and my thigh was severely injured, with bones visible through the torn flesh. Just a bit more. I mustered my last ounce of strength and charged at her once again. Even at such close range, she gracefully evaded my charge with astonishing agility, and my head slammed directly into the wall. "Where are you looking?" she taunted, mocking my failed attack. She quickly scanned my injured body and grinned, seemingly confident that my condition would prevent me from continuing. "Well, I wonder if that's really the case." "Sorry, but I didn't miss," I replied. As I pulled my head from the wall, it finally crumbled. Corroded by acidic blood, it succumbed to the successive, powerful impacts. No matter how well-made the alloy was, it couldn't withstand such force. "My intention was never to hit you in the first place, Si-hyun, not you." Beyond the shattered wall lay what I had been waiting for. Countless stars and an unfathomably deep abyss of darkness awaited us. Oh no! The pressure throughout the corridor dramatically dropped as the space, black hole-like in appearance, sucked us in along with the oxygen. The ship's environmental control systems loudly warned of severe internal damage. Even Si-hyun, who had been smiling confidently in anticipation of victory, seemed taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. Her face was now marked with bewilderment. She had wedged Galagon's claw into the corridor to hold herself in place, preventing her from being flung out. I had been waiting for this moment. I raised my injured left arm towards her, and the muzzle was pointed at her head. The distance between us wasn't great, or more precisely, it was just close enough for the bone spikes to pierce her forehead and destroy her brain before she could encase her head with the alloyed skin. Her complexion turned pale as she realized my intent. "Why, in a place like this?" she exclaimed. Perhaps she had pushed herself to the limit in the face of imminent death. She began to bleed from her eyes and nose, attempting to utilize two traits. From the tips of her black hair, the trait tungsten alloy skin slowly began to encase her head for protection. I couldn't wait any longer and fired the bone spike. The ice-like bone spike left the tip of my arm. In an age of lasers, plasma, and all sorts of futuristic weaponry, a primitive form of ammunition hurtled through the air, aiming for her head. However, by that time, the alloyed skin had already covered more than half of her head. At that moment, there was barely 5 centimeters left for the bone spike to reach her forehead. Suddenly, she froze in her tracks. The alloyed skin, in the process of encasing her head, came to an abrupt halt. She looked at me with an expression of disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom what was happening. Her gaze was fixed behind me. "Leave the baby alone." "Number 26? I didn't even need to turn my head to see it. A violet energy beam was emanating from number 26's body, tightly wrapping around its head. Damn it. Number 26's time holding her was very brief, but it was enough time for the bone spike to reach its target. The bone spike pierced through Si-hyun Yujin. Her body, now deprived of its command center, lost strength and slumped down. On a black canvas, blood-red plum blossoms bloom. Si-hyun Yujin, with a hole in her head, scatters blood as she attempts to fly into outer space. I can't afford to miss this. After putting in so much effort to eliminate a formidable adversary, it would be truly disheartening if there were no rewards. I reached out my upper arm towards her. The serrated tentacle extended like a departing arrow and wrapped around her waist. There was a bone-breaking sound as her waist bent halfway, but she was already a lifeless body. I didn't care and retrieved her corpse. "Help me, baby." Oh no. It seemed like number 26 couldn't hold on any longer and was about to fly away. I quickly grabbed it with my other arm. On its body, there was a thin tentacle that I hadn't seen before. I knew what that tentacle was, and I also knew what the true race of number 26 was. I'll think about that later. For now, I had to get out of this place. Don't let go. The research ship had blast doors in each section, and I was currently in the nest, the area densely packed with facilities related to the ship's reactor. The blast door that sealed off this section was not far from where I stood. I carried the corpse in one arm and number 26 in the other, making my way to the blast door. Upon manipulating the terminal next to the door, there was a hissing sound as the blast door closed. From the other side of the door, I faintly heard the alarm from the environmental control system. This ship is finished now. A hole the size of a human had appeared in the ship's structure. The environmental control system had its limits in maintaining the ship's environment when there was such a breach. If there were people on board, they would seal off the breach section to stabilize it, but aside from the pirates, there were very few remaining crew members on the ship. Furthermore, they were likely hiding and unaware of the situation. "Baby, what's wrong with your arm?" Upon hearing number 20's words, I looked at my lower arm and noticed that the bone spike launcher was changing. 4 fingers protruded from the muzzle, and the length had decreased to match the size of my other arms. Besides that, the sensation of pressure that had been compressing my entire body was gradually diminishing. The psionium effect had ended. It's a shame. Still, I was relieved that it wasn't painful when it was released. Considering my injuries from the battle with Si-Hyun, I wondered if I would have fainted if the pain of evolution had overlapped. Nevertheless, I obtained something more important. The result of high risk and high return was right in front of me. In the game, Megacorp rankers possessed over 100 different genes on average. It might not seem like a large number, but these genes were all from rare creatures that were nearly impossible to encounter by conventional means. Even if the number was small, their value was by no means insignificant. Of course, Si-Hyun Yujin was at the level of upper-tier players who couldn't enter the ranks of rankers, but still, her body likely contained a considerable number of genes. It's not much different from sampling, so I should get around 3 this time. The difference was that no matter which one I extracted, it was highly unlikely to be a dud. Frankly, even getting just one would be great. I hope I can extract Galagon's claw. Then I'll enjoy this. I needed to eat quickly and then go clean up the cyborgs in the command center. Just as I was about to think that way and bring it to my mouth, I was eating a corpse. When only the lower half remained, a massive energy explosion swept me away. I died. A bomb. Abruptly activated Predator's sense made me recall the forgotten fact. Although I had been focused on fighting Si-Hyun, the timer on the bomb installed by the boss at the reactor was still ticking. How much time is left? In the future that Predator's sense showed me, the bomb had detonated while Si-Hyun's corpse was reduced to only her lower body. It took about 10 to 15 minutes at most for me to completely devour an adult male corpse. Since Si-Hyun was a woman and smaller than a man, she would be consumed even faster. So, there should be approximately 5 minutes left. I had 2 options: rush to the reactor to defuse the bomb or quickly leave this ship. I pondered over the 2 choices. I don't have enough time to defuse the bomb. While playing a morph, I had disarmed bombs several times, but if it was a bomb with an unfamiliar design, it would take time to disarm. I had finally caught Si-Hyun, and I had no intention of risking my life for another adventure. I didn't have any more time to waste. Even now, the clock embedded in the bomb was ticking relentlessly towards destruction. I made my decision. Let's abandon the ship. As much as I regretted leaving behind the cyborgs in the command center and the genes of the boss that I hadn't eaten, I wasn't willing to risk my life. After all, Si-Hyun Yujin's genes, right here, were overwhelmingly superior, and there would be plenty of opportunities to eat the cyborgs later. The escape pod was docked on the runway. The runway was located directly opposite the reactor, and it would take about 5 minutes to reach it through the complex corridors. It was late to activate the escape pod from the runway, but I knew a way to get there quickly. I'll have to use this. I cradled number 26 in my arms and rushed to the ship's cooling room. Once inside, I grabbed the plasma launcher that was standing in the corner. Flash. ZZZ. Yes, it did flash. Number 26 adjusted the color of its body to match the energy projectile's color from the plasma launcher, turning it green. Although it didn't quite grasp the concept of a plasma launcher, it seemed to remember that people would explode whenever the green light flashed. The plasma launcher looked somewhat similar to the ultimate weapon from classic FPS games. It was over a meter long and weighed more than 50 kilograms. It had a stand, but I didn't need it, so I had removed it for easier use. Of course, I don't have any intention of shooting it at a person right now. I walked out into the corridor with the launcher, aiming it at the closest section of the outer wall. Charging 10, 20, 50, 80, 100%. As I manipulated the terminal on the launcher, it began to charge energy. Number 26, who had been watching, climbed onto my shoulder. In just a few seconds, the launcher finished charging. I pulled the trigger. The immense recoil transmitted through my arm as a green beam shot out from the launcher's barrel. An energy beam capable of destroying everything pierced through the corridor walls and even the outer hull of the ship. Like a vacuum cleaner sucking in air, the massive hole that appeared on the ship sucked us out along with the air. I let my body go with the flow, and we escaped the spaceship along with the air. Before the ship's distance grew too far, I shot a tentacle to anchor us to the ship's exterior. I knew exactly where the cargo container was located, even from outside the ship. Pulling myself toward the ship, I landed on the target. Whoa, this is fun. Number 26, who had witnessed the endless night, exclaimed in excitement. There we were, on a ship that resembled a white paper floating in a black sea, where there was no oxygen or gravity. A six-legged monster was running on a ship with a woman's corpse and a plasma launcher on it. It was a powerful weapon, but I didn't feel too attached to it. There would be plenty of opportunities to acquire more in the future. I crawled into the hole created by the launcher. Inside the cargo container, I could see both a shuttle and an escape pod. It's fun. With number 26, who seemed to enjoy the sensation of floating in space, in tow, I approached the escape pod. The door to the escape pod was open, as if someone had intended to board it. Well, it's more convenient this way. Easy. Just grab whatever you can. Yeah. Whether it was a high-ranking officer's escape pod or intended for the command staff, the interior was luxurious. While number 26 marveled at the ornate decorations, I took the pilot's seat. Let's see. I had piloted a few Megacorp small spacecraft before. Fortunately, the control system for the escape pod was straightforward, except for this uncomfortable seat because of the tail. I broke the uncomfortable chair and adjusted the switches on the dashboard for navigation. As I did, the cargo container door opened, and the glow of the runway spilled in. Let's go then. I pulled the control lever, and the escape pod shot forward like an arrow. The view through the reinforced glass changed from the cold metal walls to a colorful space filled with stars, resembling a canvas painted with a rainbow. This was where I first set foot in this world, the place where my journey of growth and evolution had begun. Fuck, I thought I was a goner. Elchin shuddered as he recalled what had happened at the reactor just a moment ago. When he had finally arrived at the reactor, struggling with his partially paralyzed body, the timer had been counting down precisely 2 minutes. He had barely managed to disarm the bomb with 5 seconds to spare. Any later, and he would have been blown to smithereens by his own bomb. Those damn monsters. During his journey to this point, Elchin had never once thought of himself as weak. But those two were the exceptions. So, Elchin had given up on personally killing them. Of course, even among the ruthless space pirates, they were notorious for their cruelty. He had no intention of leaving them be. Haha, fuck you guys die together. He had set the bomb to auto-detonate and reset the timer to 10 minutes. By the time he had escaped in the escape pod, those monsters would have turned the ship into a ghost in the vastness of space. That's what he had thought just 5 minutes ago. He was almost in the cargo container now. Damn it. My legs are starting to regain feeling, but my eyes. As an enhanced Hulk mutant, Elchin had already detoxified himself, but his damaged heart remained a problem. The destruction of his auxiliary heart had affected his senses, causing significant damage to his vision, hearing, and other senses. His vision, in particular, had been severely impaired, leaving him with extreme farsightedness. Navigating simple tasks, like pressing a few buttons, became challenging when he couldn't see, and he almost accidentally triggered the bomb moments ago. Nonetheless, time was running out, so he continued walking diligently. The enemies who had been fighting so loudly just moments ago were now eerily silent, indicating that one of them had clearly been defeated. Whoever loses, the remaining one won't get away unscathed, Elchin thought. His mind seemed preoccupied with the rustling sound of the space wind, but he dismissed it as his imagination. As he continued to walk, he suddenly heard footsteps echoing in the corridor. He wondered if it might be his subordinates, But the person who appeared at the end of the corridor was someone he hadn't expected at all. Icha, a pirate. Wait, isn't that the captain? Surprisingly, the person in front of him was none other than Samuel, the captain of this ship. Elchin had thought he had escaped long ago, so his sudden appearance caught him off guard. Samuel's appearance was quite different from the description Elchin had received from Garlic. His hair was disheveled, dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and his body emitted the scent of alcohol. Elchin's eyes narrowed as he observed Samuel's pitiful appearance. Originally, he planned to escape using an escape pod, but he must be hiding because he didn't want to abandon the ship. There was no lack of greed among the upper echelons of Megacorp. The closer they were to noble capital, the more pronounced this tendency became. The Samuel family, being the third capital, valued money over life. He must have come out to check when the ship became quiet. Samuel had no idea that Elchin was reading his thoughts like an open book. Confronted by Elchin's imposing presence, Samuel was trembling and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object. Elchin scoffed when he saw that it was a gun. Huh, you're going to shoot me with that. STA, stay away. This is a plasma pistol. What? Plasma or not? You should take the safety off first, right? Safety? Samuel, flustered, tried to turn the barrel to check the safety pin. Elchin took advantage of the opportunity and lunged at him. Samuel, colliding with his body, lost his grip on the pistol. You made me feel scared for no reason, you idiot. Plasma pistols don't have safeties. Elchin picked up the gun that had fallen to the ground. The impact had made the gold markings on it even more distinct, but Elchin didn't notice due to his primitive condition. If I had more time, I'd skin you alive, but I don't have time now. Elchin taunted Samuel while picking up the pistol. Samuel's face filled with despair. Hike, spare me. If you ask me to be your servant, I'll be your servant. No need, then goodbye. Elchin pulled the trigger, and the plasma pistol emitted a green glow. If Elchin hadn't had his heart destroyed, he would have realized something was wrong with the pistol. If he hadn't tried to kill Samuel and just walked to the cargo container, he would have been safe. Arrogance and cruelty led him to make 2 consecutive wrong choices due to his fatal flaw. The plasma pistol was an extremely lightweight version of the powerful plasma weapon, and, as such, it was not very durable. It had already been knocked to the ground once by the monster and cracked, and when it took an additional hit there, the pistol was already past its limits. As a result, the barrel shattered before the plasma energy charged into it could even pass through the muzzle. The energy had nowhere to go and exploded on the spot. Elchin's entire upper body was blown off, and he fell to the ground in a heap. As Samuel stared at the lifeless body of the pirate, his face contorted with a mixture of emotions. Then he began to laugh, seemingly losing his sanity. Ha ha ha. He thought to himself that his judgment had been correct all along. Samuel had never abandoned the ship. He had contemplated leaving through an escape pod when he found himself alone, but upon boarding it, he was filled with regret. This research vessel was far from cheap. While it was cheaper than his life, Samuel thought that maybe he could wait a little longer and things would turn out all right. Maybe the soldiers will succeed in killing the monster. Or maybe another passing ship will come to their aid, he thought. However, a miracle had occurred. The screams and vibrations from inside the ship had stopped. Uncertain whether he should leave or stay, he finally ventured outside. And thus, Samuel survived. Through both the assault of the monster and the attack of the pirates, he had managed to stay alive. He, the eldest son of the Samuel lineage, felt his chest swell with emotion. I am invincible. With these words, a bright light emanated from the nuclear reactor. Oops. Oh, baby. Ziggy, calm down. The reactor finally exploded, and a massive shockwave shook the escape pod. I adjusted the controls as the escape pod beeped. As if to confirm that my work had paid off, the beeping subsided and the ship stabilized. ZZZ, are you okay? I turned around and saw that number 26 had hit the wall and was knocked out. It wasn't life-threatening, so I put it on a bed inside the escape pod. What the hell? Has someone been drinking here? I cleared away a rolling liquor bottle from the floor and began to tidy up the escape pod. I needed to clean up the surroundings if I wanted to have a proper meal, which I had postponed until now. The lifeless body of Si-hyun Yujin was tucked away in a corner. Finally, it was time to have a meal. I set the escape pod to autopilot and retrieved her corpse. Then, I started by tearing off her tantalizing legs and took a big bite. Until now, I've eaten more than a few hundred creatures. So, I roughly know what kind of creatures taste good. Among the creatures I've eaten so far, the most delicious was Kaisaraji Yujin. She had a refined and well-calculated taste, like a high-end course meal. Perhaps she had her genes modified to taste that way. So, I thought that this Yujin here would be similar. But I was mistaken. Undoubtedly, the taste of Si-hyun Yujin was excellent, to the extent that it didn't fall behind among the creatures I've eaten and would eat in the future. Maybe I should visit Earth sometime. Originally, I had no plans to go to the Megacorp capital anytime soon. But after eating Si-hyun Yujin's meat, my determination wavered. I shook my head and took another bite. It was fascinating. Usually, the first bite is the most delicious, but it was the opposite in her case. The more I ate, the more I chewed, the richer the flavor became. Here, it was just me and the unconscious number 26. Nobody would disturb my meal. I leisurely enjoyed her meat, as if savoring a high-end French course meal. As the seemingly eternal happiness came to an end, a semi-transparent text box announced the end of the feast. In the SF game, Space Survival, there aren't many fantasy elements, but there are a few exceptions. One of the most prominent is the Space Elves, known for their elf-like appearance and magical-like powers. Then there are the psychic life forms called Vortex Ones, and the space dragon known as Galagon, which strongly exhibits fantasy traits. The creatures capable of using psychic powers exist beyond these three races, but what sets them apart is how they use psychic powers like magic. You could compare them to elves, demons, and dragons, more or less. Galagon, also known as the Dragon of Space, is extremely rare, and ordinary players find it challenging to encounter them due to their scarcity. As rare as they are, many beginners mistake them for looking like actual dragons. However, in reality, they are quite different. While they share some similarities with dragons, such as a massive reptilian body, wings on their backs, and horned heads, there's a significant difference. Instead of a mouth, they have a cluster of tentacles where it should be. Galagon feeds on blood and psychic energy, so their oral structure is unlike that of ordinary animals, consisting of tentacles. Additionally, it's said that a Galagon's color represents its growth level, distinguishing it from dragons. The Galagon claw trait I got from Si-hyun represents the genes of a white Galagon. If we compare it to a scale of power, it's somewhere in the middle, leaning towards the higher end. It's incredibly rare to acquire a Galagon claw so quickly. Even a mature blue Galagon, which is considered to be one level below, will be challenging to capture. Needless to say, a white Galagon 2 levels higher is even more remarkable. I have no idea where they obtained something as precious as a Galagon claw, but I'm grateful for it. The next trait I obtained after the Galagon claw is camouflage skin. In fact, among the traits Si-hyun gave me, this ability can be called a jackpot due to its incredible power. To be honest, I'm more curious about where they found a giant chameleon than a Galagon. Since giant chameleons are herbivores, they are not particularly powerful in combat. They are weak enough that they can be easily hunted even in a morph form. The problem lies in the fact that finding them is incredibly difficult. Giant chameleons create a special magnetic field from the spikes on their skin. This magnetic field makes it impossible to observe them with equipment or traits. None of my auxiliary devices, traits like camouflage, electronic devices, psychic powers, and so on can penetrate it. You can only see the giant chameleon with the naked eye, making spotting it akin to finding a needle in a haystack. You might suggest searching for them one by one, but the issue is that their habitat is unknown. In a game with thousands of planets, how would you know where to look? I've only obtained giant chameleon essence 3 times in my time playing the Amorph, so I've said enough. Even if I wanted to buy their genes as an Amorph, it's not possible. To acquire the essence, you must hunt them yourself using the predation effect. Of course, you can also achieve the predation effect by consuming a large amount of samples or even eating the already dead bodies. However, the acquisition rate is too low through these methods, making them inefficient. So, the best method is to put in the hard work. Thanks to that hard work, I've gained valuable information. It might even turn out to be an advantage. Regarding camouflage skin, I have some information that even rankers don't know. You can actually combine mimicry and camouflage skin to create an entirely new trait when they merge. That fact was known to no one, so the one who possessed this merged trait in the game was none other than me. The name of the trait that combines mimicry and camouflage skin is Mimicry Organ. It's a trait that makes others perceive me as the appearance of the prey I've consumed. The operation of this trait is somewhat complex, but let me explain it briefly. First, the mimicry organ analyzes the genetic information of the prey it has consumed. Then, it emits a special pheromone created from the analyzed information throughout the entire skin to disrupt the senses of other organisms. As long as other creatures are within the area of my pheromone, they perceive me as the prey. Furthermore, the mimicry effect remains, allowing me to mimic the voice of the prey. The pheromone's area itself is quite generous, so the effect can be seen even when there is some distance. It can be said that this trait is optimized for infiltration, ambush, and guerrilla warfare, among other things. But it's not without its downsides. First of all, the mimicry organ does not change my physical appearance. Since it deceives other organisms with pheromones, I am fully exposed to devices like cameras that don't pick up pheromones, and my reflection remains unchanged in mirrors. The mimicry effect itself is not perfect either. While it replicates the appearance of the prey, it cannot depict complex emotional changes like joy or sorrow, aside from simple actions. As a result, the uncanny valley phenomenon is quite severe. Even someone who is completely clueless would feel discomfort and unease when in the same space. It also shares the downsides of mimicry, such as being unable to speak long and complicated lines during the mimicry effect, or being unable to describe the previous prey when a new one is consumed, and so on. Despite its clear pros and cons, it has many practical uses in temporarily confusing the perspective of others. Lastly, there's clairvoyance. The first 2 traits are excellent, but clairvoyance is a somewhat subtle trait. Although it's a good trait, in space survival, clairvoyance is called that, but it's subtly different from the concept we know in reality. It's closer to a kind of superspatial perception ability. Instead of seeing what's actually behind a wall, it's more like reconstructing what might be there based on the information of the surrounding environment and elements. However, the reconstruction effect is so similar to reality that it's called clairvoyance just for the sake of it. In a way, it can be seen as similar to abilities in the precognition category. Up to this point, you might feel that it's somewhat similar to something else. It's similar to Amorph's supersensibility. It would have been a good trait if it wasn't for Amorph's superior sensibility. Because Amorph's supersense is so close to clairvoyance, clairvoyance becomes a hindrance. But still, it counts as a psychic-type power. It's not immediately useful, but it's a valuable trait related to psychic powers. Moreover, it can be used for fusion later on, so it's better than not having it. Monster's tentacle? Without a chance to question it, my body began to undergo a transformation. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pull in my back. An itching sensation washed over my entire body. Small clusters of tentacles rapidly grew long. Due to the sudden growth, my head felt heavy, and I could feel the tips of the tentacles on my shoulders. On my body, tiny holes were forming in the chitinous exoskeleton that covered my skin. If someone with trypophobia were to examine my skin with a magnifying glass, they would surely faint. PR/N. Trypophobia is an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. Above the punctured holes, something membrane-like was emerging, and it seemed like my exoskeleton had transformed into geometric patterns. It wasn't a next stage evolution, so the mutation ended quickly. I touched the long, octopus-like tentacles. They looked exactly like the tentacles attached to Galagon's mouth. As far as I know, Galagon doesn't have a psychic organ, and acquiring the tentacles in its mouth through a trait is impossible. It's like trying to obtain fingers or toes as traits for a human. I don't know the English term, but I've definitely acquired a better weapon. The ability to shoot a sword storm composed of psychic energy is good, but the monster's tentacles have a wide range of uses beyond just offense. It's an unexpected outcome, but not a bad one. I guess the mimicry organ is as expected. Lastly, clairvoyance has been applied, but I didn't feel any significant change. Still, thanks to it, I'm only one step away from acquiring a psychic-related type. Now I have 4 psychic-related traits: predator sense, human nature, monster's tentacles, and clairvoyance, making it 4 in total. If I evolve into a transcendent being from here, I'll receive psychic resistance as a special reward, bringing it to 5. In other words, if I can acquire just one more, I'll secure a psychic-related type. That made me think of something. I looked at number 26, who had fainted and fallen asleep. Could it be that number 26 is a sea demon? Many marine life enthusiasts have tracked the ecology of sea demons, but no one has ever discovered how sea demons are born. So, everyone accepted it as a game allowance, and I did too. At least until today. Maybe the sudden mutation of bubble amoebas into sea demons. Apart from size, they look similar in appearance and have similar ecologies. And while sea demons are such fearsome creatures that they're called the overlords of the sea, they don't prey on bubble amoebas. Perhaps they are of the same species, which is why. Whether number 26 is a sea demon or a mutant with the potential to evolve into one is extremely important in the current situation. Sea demons do have psychic-related traits. It's a trait called abyssal terror that drives people within a certain range insane. It's similar to the illusion trait of red mist, but the range is incomparable, and it's a passive trait that's always active. It's a very powerful trait, but sea demons are such dangerous monsters that it's not easy to acquire the trait. It's perhaps as rare as Galagon's claws. And there might be someone who possesses that trait right in front of me, albeit in a much weaker state compared to a sea demon. No, I hesitated for a moment, but shook my head firmly. It's not certain whether number 26 will indeed evolve into a sea demon with that potential. Even if it does, there's no guarantee that the predation effect will trigger. That's about it. Hunting and evolving alone is an enjoyable task, but traveling with other beings is also a new experience. Hunters always seek knowledge. Accepting everything with an open mind broadens your horizons and makes you stronger. I stroked number 26. The creature was a useful presence for me. I intend to help it as much as possible until my life is at risk. Having cleared my thoughts about number 26, I went to the control seat and switched the navigation from manual to automatic. Please set the destination. Destination, huh? I pressed a button on the dashboard with my small hand, and several holographic options appeared. The default location was a planet under the jurisdiction of Megacorp, which was the original target of the research vessel. But there's no need to go there. Megacorp's planets were heavily fortified with large-scale troops. Depending on the planet, the details might differ slightly, but it was impossible for me to confront them in my current state. Where's the nearest place from here? I searched my memories for places we could go. In the process, I spotted a familiar location. TNC Special Trade Center. It was a huge space colony floating in space, and I was quite familiar with it. In the game, it was a well-known gathering place for players trading various gene essences. It was also a place where all sorts of genetic samples were gathered, so I visited it regularly. Thanks to that, I got a lot of insults. The cowardly players called me a bastard, but Amorphs were originally that kind of race. So what could I do? If they felt so unjustly treated, they could become amorphs themselves. Of course, it didn't mean that they wouldn't eat amorphs just because they were amorphs. Anyway, if it's a colony where various races gather, it will be good nourishment for my growth. I'll reset the course to TNC Special Trade Center. Estimated time until arrival is 3 hours. 3 hours. I decided to take a short break until we reached our destination. I replenished my energy through a meal, but I had expended a lot of mental energy during consecutive battles. I lay down next to number 26, caressing the creature nestled in my arms, and slowly drifted off to sleep. Star Union's capital, CAX-01. Rain contaminated by black smog, with not a trace of light to be found, poured down. Following the falling raindrops, one could see factories emitting continuous smoke. No matter where you looked on the planet, there were factories, smog, and pictures attached to every building. The pictures depicted a man with mechanical eyes and clenched fists, wearing a dignified expression. His name was Chewbacca, the Lord of Star Union and the parent of all cyborgs. Cyborgs walking down the street would salute every time they saw a picture, but no one found it strange. Here in the Star Union, it was perfectly normal. Amidst the strange scenery, there was one building with no pictures. It looked like an abandoned building, but beneath it, there was a facility unknown to the cyborgs. Contrasting the dark atmosphere above ground, a perfectly clean medical chamber was hidden below, housing medical capsules. A capsule, shaped like an immaculate coffin, opened slowly with mechanical sounds as soon as it unlocked. As the capsule opened, a pale arm emerged from inside. Ugh, cough, cough. The owner of the arm was a woman. With black hair and a slender figure, she was a beautiful lady. She coughed as she sat up. Her name was Si-Hyun Yujin, or to be more precise, she was her clone. Si-Hyun Yujin, as the shadow of a Yujin family, was an incredibly strong presence to the point where her enemies couldn't find her. However, she hadn't been that way from the beginning. Back when genetic modification was not yet complete, she had taken out insurance for the future. If she were to die, her clone self would take her place. In Megacorp, the technology for human cloning was somewhat of a taboo, but she had hidden her own clone as an insurance policy against her enemies. I never thought I'd become a clone. Si-Hyun looked at her body. Her skin was as white as a newborn's, with smooth and flawless curves. It was a beautiful physique, but she felt unfamiliar with it. It was inevitable because some of the genes she originally possessed hadn't been updated in the clone. All the genetic abilities she had, like Galagon's claws or Red Mist's illusion power, and countless others, were all lost. It was unknown how long it would take to recover the genes she had lost because of those damned creatures. It had caused a significant setback to her grand plan. That damn bastard. Next time I meet him, I'll rip out his brain. Si-Hyun Yujin's eyes were filled with deep hatred. As the light faded and the starlight awakened, the port zone of TNC Special Trade Center was still bustling. Workers in coveralls, businessmen in suits, tourists from various alien races, and all sorts of sentient beings were diligently going about their business under the vibrant neon signs. Even the carpenters working at the port were doing overtime, just like everyone else. During their break, Carpenter was engrossed in reading a web novel on his small terminal when his communication device beeped. Bleep. Hey, Carpenter, are you busy? Howard, what's up? The Megacorp escape pod just arrived. Where did it come from? They contacted us from a control tower, but there's no response. It seems like there might be some issues with the automated navigation. Looks like some spoiled rich kid ran away again. I'll check it out. It's in Zone 7. Following his colleague's directions, Carpenter arrived at a lavishly decorated escape pod. It was undoubtedly an expensive-looking small spacecraft. Carpenter whistled when he saw it. Ah, one of those runaway rich brats again, I bet. Cases of upper capital citizens trying to escape in escape ships occurred from time to time. Carpenter was convinced it was one of those cases. He knocked on the escape ship's door. Is there anyone inside? He waited for a response, but there was none. Carpenter sighed and took out his hacking device. He connected a cable to the terminal next to the door and began manipulating the device. As a result, the escape pod's door easily opened. Why do they always turn off the lights and stuff? The inside of the escape ship was pitch black, without a single light. Carpenter, wearing a helmet with a lantern, looked around the interior. Where did they go? Despite signs of someone being here, like bottles on the floor and a broken control panel, there was no one in sight. Something sticky on the sole of his shoe caught Carpenter's attention. He touched it, and as he did, more of the substance fell from above. He looked up and saw it on the ceiling. Hey, Carpenter, where did he go? Huh? He said he's leaving early today. Really? The guy who said he needed to make money to buy a house is leaving early? Yeah, he's going that way. Howard turned his head in the direction his colleague pointed. He saw Carpenter walking away about 20 meters ahead. Hey, Carpenter. As Howard called out, Carpenter stopped in his tracks. Coincidentally, he stood in a dark alley where the street light didn't reach. Even though it wasn't very dark due to the proximity, his upper body was obscured in the shadow to the point where his outline couldn't be seen. Why is he standing in a place like that? Howard felt an odd sensation when he looked at Carpenter. Despite seeing his gait and clothes, it felt as if he were seeing a different presence. Hey, aren't you working overtime today? Just leaving like that? Yeah, I'm busy. What did the site manager say? Yeah, he said I could go because I'm busy. With that response, Carpenter disappeared into the darkness of the alley. Strangely, as Carpenter vanished, the discomfort he felt also disappeared. Damn, does he always have to act like that when I talk to him? Leave him alone. Must be in a bad mood. Haha. Howard returned to work with his chuckling colleague. The next day, Carpenter didn't show up at the port zone. Even in the game, I was tired of it, and now it's happening in real life. Currently, I find myself in a dark alley in the Harbor District. There are no cameras here, and the street itself is obscured by buildings, so there's no light coming in. Number 26, nestled in my arms, emitted a feeling of discomfort. It's stuffy da. ZZZ. Just bear with a bit. Yada. I petted the little guy to calm it down and looked out into the alley. In the distance, beneath the artificially created night sky from the massive dome-shaped screen, the lights from advertisements were dazzlingly chaotic. It may look glamorous on the surface, but I knew well what this city was really like. It's a sick place. It may not be as significant as the Earth, which serves as Megacorp's capital, but this place is no ordinary interdimensional landscape. There are plenty of people who treat human lives like flies, and individuals driven to heinous crimes by hedonism are abundant. While many come here for tourism or job opportunities, it's also a place where many depart, but not by choice. That's the TNC Special Economic Zone for you. So that's why I chose this place. Now, where should I start? This cosmic city is divided into 5 zones: the Eastern Harbor District, the Western Residential District, the Southern Entertainment District, the Northern Commercial District, and finally, the Central Administrative District that oversees all the zones. Among them, the 2 least secure areas are the Entertainment District and the Residential District. In the Entertainment District, there are places where Megacorp citizens indulge their secret desires with employed slaves. Just like the surveillance is lax in real life due to the preferences of high-ranking individuals, it's the same here. There are hardly any surveillance cameras, but combat androids roam around, apprehending criminals. Androids are formidable opponents, so I can't go to the Entertainment District right now. The zone I need to go to is somewhere else. The Residential District, although it's called the Residential District, it's more like a slum in reality. It's where the middle to lower tier Megacorp employees and alien races with jobs in this city mainly reside. It's difficult to call it a safe place, even in empty words. Any city with a concentration of the poor tends to have weak security. Furthermore, residents of the Residential District tend to spend their daily earnings extravagantly in the Entertainment District. Since many of them live for the day, they won't think too much if someone from the next door disappears. As long as you're cautious of the police and androids patrolling, there shouldn't be any major issues with gradual growth. All right, I've decided where to go. Now, how to get there? There are limitations to moving only through narrow streets. Unlike research stations, the Space City is well equipped with security facilities, and there are many androids patrolling. A place where you can go anywhere in the city without catching anyone's eye. I know two routes that meet this criterion precisely: the sewer and the underground subway. Both of them are essential facilities responsible for water and transportation, created when the Space City was built. As facilities that handle the vital elements of life, water, and transportation, they essentially serve as the city's bloodstream. If it were a game, I'd go through the sewer, but might be tough in reality. Since you can't extract water in space, this place relies on two methods to supply water to the residents: recycling sewage and periodic water shipments from the outside. In the game, this is just background information, but here, it's real. The sewage system is likely to be under much higher levels of management than what I know. Unfortunately, let's go through the underground subway. I moved along with number 26. Sometimes we walked through dim alleyways, and other times we crossed rooftops. In the Central Administrative District, there are many tall buildings, so someone might catch sight of me. But in this harbor district, there are no high-rises. People on the streets had no clue about what was passing above their heads. Let's see. The passage should be around here. Of course, I had no intention of walking into the entrance of the subway station. Androids and surveillance cameras guard it, and entering there would surely cause a commotion. Ras glanced briefly towards the bedroom. The white sheets on the bed were now stained red. He thought about tidying up a bit and leaving, but then he shook his head. The scattered remains would be cleaned up by the shop. That's what the money was for, after all. With a refreshed face, Ras left the shop and suddenly felt like having a drink. Let's have a drink before bed. Thinking it was not a bad choice, he bought a few bottles of synthetic liquor and headed for the residential district. As soon as he exited the subway station, he was met with silence. Unlike the entertainment district, which was noisy due to neon signs, the residential district was quiet. If he were an upper capital, he would live in the buildings in the administrative district and the upscale residences, but Ras was a low capital. It was better than sleeping in a sleep capsule, but there wasn't much difference between the residential district and the non-capital residences. It wasn't exactly comfortable. The dim and dirty apartment, along with poor security, led Ras and his team to dub the place as a chicken coop. Damn it, who broke another streetlight? Normally, the streetlights should illuminate the streets, but they were all smashed in various places. They would probably be repaired in a few days, but the fact that Ras had to walk through these dark streets until then annoyed him. Grumbling, Ras took a flashlight from his bag. Light emanated from the end of the flashlight, illuminating his path. Crunch, crunch. The sound of stepping on broken glass shattered the stillness of the residential district. It was a route he walked regularly, but today he had an odd feeling. What's this smell? An unpleasant odor wafted up from the road. Ras thought a sewer might have burst, and just then, he noticed a manhole cover. The manhole cover, usually closed, was slightly ajar. These idiots should have closed it if they were doing construction. Ras muttered while pinching his nose and walked past it. Though he was already quite far from the manhole, the smell didn't dissipate. It seemed like the entire street was filled with an ominous odor. Something was wrong. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but Ras had a sense that something bad was happening. The smell and the eerie darkness made his steps involuntarily quicken. He was practically running to his home when he spotted something in the middle of the road. Fuck! Startled, Ras shouted a profanity-laced cry. The sound of his cry seemed to reach the person who had been in the darkness. It was a young man. Damn, I thought you were a ghost. For a moment, Ras had thought he was a monster, but it turned out to be a person. Relieved, he took a closer look at the man. The man was wearing work clothes, suggesting that he worked in the harbor district. With an ordinary face, he had a red-like ball attached to his side. What the fuck is he doing? Ras felt a sense of unease about the man for some reason. Until he arrived, this place had been a pitch-black wasteland. Seeing someone standing still in such a place, holding that strange ball-like object, was suspicious. What are you doing? Just heading home. The young man responded calmly with a flat tone. His voice seemed entirely ordinary compared to his actions, which somewhat reassured Ras. Ahem, be careful. Then I'll be on my way. Excuse me. Yes. It's quite dark, so I thought we could walk together. Ras hesitated at the man's request. He wasn't thrilled about walking with this unsettling guy, but given the darkness of the street, he eventually agreed. "Follow me." "Thank you." As the man followed him, they set off again down the quiet street. While walking in silence, the man behind him spoke up. "Hey, yes. You're a cyborg, right?" "Well, yes." "I see." With that statement, the man fell silent. What the hell? Ras thought. Was this guy trying to discriminate against cyborgs in Megacorp? He was about to say something when a strange smell once again tickled his nose. It was much stronger and more unpleasant than before. Somehow, the smell seemed to be creeping in from behind Ras. Ras had been about to curse, but he stopped himself and glanced briefly behind him. When he saw the man, he felt a chilling sensation down his spine. The man following him wasn't looking at the light. He didn't even blink. He was staring directly at Ras. That alone sent shivers down Ras's spine, but then he noticed something more. The red ball attached to the man's arm was squirming. Damn it, he had heard stories before. Among the upper capitals, there were some lunatics who kept only a person's head alive and played with it. Coincidence? The object the man was holding was about the size of a human head. With that thought, Ras couldn't take it anymore. His home wasn't far. He left the man behind and began to run. Pant, pant, pant. When he looked back, the man was still standing in the darkness. It was pitch black, making it almost impossible to recognize, but Ras could feel it. The man gazed at him with an expressionless face. Fortunately, nothing happened until Ras reached his home. Whether it was due to running or fear, Ras's clothes were soaked with sweat. The urge to drink was long gone, but he was thirsty. Ras uncapped the synthetic liquor, which was dripping with cold water. He took a long gulp, the heat and tingles spreading from his throat to his entire body. Ugh, I'll have to report you tomorrow. Perhaps due to the influence of alcohol, or maybe because the tension was slowly dissipating, Ras let out a relieved sigh as he realized he had finally arrived home. Ugh, shitty neighborhood. I'll have to go somewhere else when I save up. Muttering about an unattainable dream, he turned on the old virtual TV. The narrow room suddenly became noisy, and a feeling of unease intensified. Ras approached the window and looked outside. It was pitch black, and there was no sign of anyone. He's gone. The cyborg had dashed away for some reason. Ras had a vague idea of why. A subtle sense of discomfort. He didn't outright know I was a monster, but he seemed to sense that something was different. If he had sensitive senses, he might have faintly perceived the subtle chemical signals in my pheromones. Still, the purpose of my mimicry organs was simply to make it easier to ambush. I had no intention of interacting with humans. This level of adaptation was sufficient. He's scared of me, duh. Zzz, why is that? I don't know, duh. The cyborg seemed to have reservations about me as well, but what had the greatest impact on his heart rate was number 26. When he glanced at that one, his heart rate reached its highest point. Why would he be so scared of number 26? It's the first time I've seen someone fear bubble amoebas, the mascots of healing. Of course, number 26 is a mutant, but it looks exactly like other bubble amoebas, so there shouldn't be any reason to fear it. It's strange how this cute little creature could be terrifying. Cyborgs are truly incomprehensible. Speaking of which, did he say he was a cyborg? After the psionium effect wore off, I returned to my current metamorph state. To evolve into an pre-saint, I need to consume one more cyborg. That's great, I just needed that. He may not know it, but I've already pinpointed which house he entered. The lingering scent he left behind as he fled still lingers in the air. The next day, before going to work, Ras reported the strange man he had seen yesterday to the police. Having made the report, there was nothing more he could do. The rest would be up to the police. So he spent the day at his busy job, trying to forget about yesterday's incident. Lost in his work, he didn't realize that quitting time was approaching. He hurriedly grabbed his bag, intending to escape from this hellish place, but his team leader grabbed him. Ras, you're not leaving early today. Judging by the team leader's expression, it seemed like he might end up as a mountain crawler's meal if he left. In the end, Ras had to stay late at work with his unwilling teammates. That team leader is such a lunatic. It was only well into the night that he could finally break free from his work. Normally, he would go to a bar to relieve stress, but it was already quite late. To be able to get to work the next day, he had to go back home. As usual, Ras bought a synthetic drink and walked to the subway station in the residential district. The streetlights, which had been broken yesterday, were now brightly lit, casting a reassuring light on the streets. There was no sign of any suspicious individuals in the well-lit area. On his way home, he once again noticed the manhole cover. Unlike yesterday, the cover was tightly closed. Seeing the manhole, the terrifying memories from yesterday came rushing back. Ras swallowed hard and walked past the manhole. Fortunately, nothing he feared happened until he reached his apartment complex. Phew! As he passed through the entrance to the complex, Ras let out a sigh of relief. He looked up at the corridor on the third floor where his apartment was located. There, Ras felt his heart stop. Something pitch black stood in the apartment corridor. With a long tail and 4 arms, it moved strangely and then opened his apartment door and entered. Without saying a word, he took out his communicator. It's narrow. As expected, the cyborg's apartment wasn't very spacious. It was a one-room apartment consisting of a bathroom, living room, and a balcony. After deciding to target the cyborg, I checked out everyone who lived in this apartment complex. It was easier to investigate during the day when most people were either at work or sleeping. During the day, I roamed the rooftop and corridors, collecting all the necessary information about who to target and when to change appearances. If no one was around, I entered the house and searched for clues, and if someone was present, I observed the inside from the outside using auxiliary equipment. Through thorough investigation, I learned that various species lived here besides humans and cyborgs. There were reptilian humans with scales, known as cold-bloods, and bipedal creatures like wolves, among others. There was a diverse range of prey available. It's a good thing that the species I need to eat to evolve into a pre-saint is difficult to obtain. Evolution conditions become more complex after reaching the pre-saint stage. I have to eat a total of 60 playable species, 20 species capable of transformation, 20 humanoid species, and 20 species using psychic powers. And achieving 4 types is one of the conditions. Space Survival is a game that emphasizes player versus player combat. Eating other species isn't that difficult for Amorphs. The real challenge lies in obtaining those 4 types. I already have 1 for physical enhancement, and I'm on the verge of acquiring 1 for psychic enhancement. But it's still a long way to go when considering the type penalties. Types don't just unlock with an abundance of traits. Key traits required to unlock type conditions, and I need to focus on acquiring those relevant traits, making it a challenging task. Additionally, the predation effect doesn't always occur. So, most Amorph players give up at this point and focus on raising other species. It might be a wise decision since the conditions for evolution beyond Saint become much more challenging. A special trade hub like this attracts many extraterrestrial species, making it easier to collect genes in one place. Collecting genetic essence by going to planets where the required species live is inefficient. Storming a place with a high concentration of them is the shortcut to rapid evolution. Especially in the special trade hub, there are quite a few cults that have immigrated from Megacorp. If I consume them as well, I can easily fulfill the condition of eating 60 extraterrestrial species. All right, I'll spend some time here. So why not take a look around? I meticulously inspected the entire apartment. Number 26, apparently delighted with this cramped and dirty space, roamed around here and there. The soundproofing isn't great. After a thorough look, that was the first thought that came to mind. The noise from the adjacent and upstairs apartments was so loud that it could be heard even here. The apartment below is vacant. There might be prospective tenants, but currently it's unoccupied. When I evolve into a saint, my weight will significantly increase, and the people downstairs will soon notice something unusual happening upstairs. I've calculated that, but my auxiliary system gave me a warning signal. Someone is approaching in the corridor. ZZZ, come here. Baby, what's going on? ZZZ, someone's coming. I called number 26 and calculated the footsteps in the corridor. There were a total of 3 individuals. The cyborg and 2 others I didn't recognize were following. The police. I had no intention of fighting with law enforcement right now, so I decided to hide inside the apartment. You said a monster entered the house, right? Yes. The door seems fine. They broke in through the door. I see. All right. The nonchalant attitude of the police officers frustrated Ras. He had clearly requested them to send support when he made the report, but the fact that only 2 of them showed up was infuriating. Is that alcohol you're holding in your hand by any chance? Yes. We saw the report that you claimed to have seen a strange person. We thought you might be drunk. Ras almost let out a string of curses, but managed to hold back. Ras belonged to the low capital class. If he had been a mid-capital, the police officers would never have behaved so rudely. Although the police officers were also from the low capital class, they were government officials, and their position was higher, hence their behavior. Of course, Ras treated lower non-capitals like dogs as well, but isn't that how most people are? They tend to forget what they've done and only remember what's been done to them, and it feels unpleasant. Since a report was filed, we have to check. Please open the door. Ugh, fine, yes. Ras sighed and entered the passcode. The door opened, and the police officers entered his apartment. The police officers clicked their tongues when they saw Ras' apartment, which was hard to describe as even remotely clean. Oh my, what a pigsty. Oh, come on. Clean up your room. Ignoring Ras' annoyed glares, they shook their heads. One of the officers inspected the bathroom, while the other checked the balcony. Nothing in particular? No way. Look, there's no one in the bathroom either. The police officer opened the bathroom door as if to show, but it was empty. The dirty bathtub and the toilet, whose cleanliness was questionable, were the only ones to greet the owner. But there's no way. No matter how he looked at it, there was no sign of a monster. Even when he opened the curtains covering the balcony, all he could see was darkness shrouding the entire area. Should we check the refrigerator? The officer asked, almost mocking Ras. Ras nodded his head in response. The officer opened the fridge with a chuckle. Inside, apart from a sandwich that looked half-eaten, it was packed with synthetic alcohol bottles. Well, maybe you should consume alcohol in moderation. There's no way. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. TSK. If you're a cyborg, you should replace your eyes first. Despite the police officer's offensive comments, Ras couldn't care less. He was a skeptic who didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural beings, but the situation he found himself in was so bizarre that it was hard to believe. I kept my eyes on it until the police arrived. He wondered if the monster had gone out through the window, but there were no signs of it being opened or closed. Moreover, if a monster were crawling around the area outside the window, it would be hard for residents in neighboring houses not to notice. The other house reported it at. Hey, you're the only one who reported it, get a grip. That can't be, as Ras shouted. There was a loud banging on the wall from the neighboring apartment. Thud, thud. The noise from next door made the police officers furrow their brows. Their expressions clearly indicated that they didn't want to stay in such a place any longer. Well, we've confirmed that there's nothing inside the house. Nothing more we can do. That's just ridiculous. We were on patrol when we received your report. If you encounter any more issues, please report them again. With those words, the police officers left. Alone in his apartment, Ras sank onto his bed. If he were to make another report, they would likely send the same officers, and the situation would repeat itself. Damn it, did I really see it wrong? Or did it leave in the meantime? The police officers' attitude hadn't been great, but they had thoroughly checked every place they could. The bathroom, the balcony, even the refrigerator. There was no space in the house where a monster could hide. Okay, just in case. Trembling, Ras approached the bathroom. The door that he opened and entered every morning felt unfamiliar today. He swallowed hard and opened the door wide. It was just as he had confirmed before. A cockroach scurried away in fright and disappeared into the drain when it saw Ras. His ominous premonitions had come to nothing. After checking the balcony as well, Ras finally felt relieved. Phew, damn it. Was I losing it? Or did it go away? Cyborgs didn't use expressions as humorous as losing it, but Ras was sincere. He took out a bottle of synthetic alcohol from the fridge and turned on the virtual TV, watching holographic images of scantily clad women dancing and enjoying the alcohol. As he sipped the drink, he could feel his mind easing. After finishing a bottle of synthetic alcohol, Ras contemplated. He had to go back to work in a few hours, and if he overindulged, he'd likely suffer from a headache all day. Ugh, when did I start caring about this? While the alcohol was tempting, the feeling that he wouldn't be able to sleep without getting drunk also influenced his decision. With that, he emptied another bottle and collapsed onto the bed. His house might be small, but he had purchased a relatively large bed because he wanted to sleep like an upper capital. Feels good. The spacious and plush bed enveloped him. The intoxication and comfort slowly took over his mind. When I get off work tomorrow, I'll choose a woman who looks like the team leader. He had vowed to let go of all the stress caused by her making him work late, but then a strange sound reached his ears. From the apartment below, he could hear the dragging of a heavy object. Grr, grr, grr. That crazy guy. Can't he do this during the day instead of at night? He muttered curses under his breath and tried to go back to sleep. Just as he was drifting off, he remembered something important. No one lived in the apartment below him. Grr, grr, grr. As if ice-cold water had been poured over him, Ras snapped back to full wakefulness. He wanted to believe that it was a sound coming from another house, but the annoying noise resonated too closely. It was as if something were hiding just under his large bed. The creature he had seen earlier. At first, he had thought it was huge, but upon reflection, it wasn't. Excluding the tail, it was only about 2/3 the size of an adult man. To be precise, it was just big enough to fit snugly under a bed. Grr, grr, grr. As he realized this, Ras's body began to tremble uncontrollably, as if possessed by a cold shiver. He desperately prayed that it was just another delusion. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in his familiar room, and he turned his gaze toward the floor beneath him. There, with only its head exposed, it was grinning, revealing its teeth. Gary couldn't sleep because of the neighbor next door who kept shouting. Crazy bastard, this time I won't just let it slide, Gary muttered to himself as he stormed out of his house. He banged on the neighboring door forcefully. Hey, you bastard, come out right now. Huh? What's this smell? Gary furrowed his brow as he pounded on the door, puzzled by an indescribable scent that mixed something akin to a metallic smell from a hardware store with an inexplicable pheromone-like aroma. Why is there a metallic smell in the middle of the night? Gary wondered aloud when, suddenly, the door swung open. It's night. Why are you making so much noise? Did you buy this place or something? Gary asked. I apologize. Ras, the man from next door, offered an apology in response to Gary's anger. Gary had intended to unleash a string of curses, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. As he looked at Ras, something about him seemed off. Having crossed paths with him a few times before, Gary had a rough idea of what kind of person he was. But the Ras before him now was clearly not behaving normally. What's with this creepiness? Gary thought. Ras stared at him with an unblinking, expressionless face, leaving Gary speechless. Hey, it's night. It would be good if you could be a bit more careful, Gary finally managed to say. I apologize. Understood. Just be more cautious from now on. Ras continued to repeat apologies like a broken machine, leaving Gary wanting to leave this place immediately. He gave a vague cautionary word and entered his own house. As a result, he didn't hear the words Ras had left behind. The next target has been chosen. After sending the neighbor away, I returned home to find number 26 rummaging through the refrigerator. It was stuffing sandwiches from the fridge into his mouth one by one. ZZZ, ZZZZ, ZZZ. Are you hungry? Want to eat? I want to eat a lot. Leaving number 26 to scavenge for food while wandering around, I picked up one of the arms lying on the floor of the room. It doesn't taste good. Surprisingly, Ras was the second least tasty thing I had eaten so far. His flesh carried the scent of alcohol and the stench of rotten meat, reminiscent of old decay. If I exclude calorie bars, which had no taste at all, RAS was the least appetizing. It seems there's a correlation between health and taste. I mused. He didn't appear to have a healthy diet, and I couldn't help but worry about consuming similar beings in this apartment complex. Well, I have to force myself to eat it, I decided. If I want to evolve, I need to at least eat this cyborg. I received a message in the text box, acknowledging my efforts. The metamorph to pre-saint evolution condition has been fulfilled. Do you wish to evolve? Originally, I had planned to finish things on a Megacorp research ship, but it seemed I had come a long way. I'll become an egg for a moment. An egg? But you're just a baby. Why are you becoming an egg? To grow bigger. A baby is going to be a big baby. Yes, don't worry. Just in case number 26 might be surprised. I informed it beforehand and then accepted the evolution. The time had come to enjoy the majesty of the subadult body, which I had briefly tasted with the psionium. She looked at the enormous egg that filled the living room. Despite being told that the baby with her had turned into an egg, it definitely didn't look like the size of an egg. Did it suddenly grow? Or did it become a cocoon? Perhaps it was because she was still young, but she couldn't grasp what kind of creature the baby had become. Nothing she had ever seen resembled this. Still, she didn't pay it much mind. When she emerged from the disgusting liquid prison, she made a vow. No matter what happened, she would protect the baby. However, until now, she had been protected by the baby more often than she had protected him, which made her uncomfortable. The baby seemed to be very hungry, and she fed him every time she saw food, but there wasn't much she could do. Would things have been different if her tentacles were stronger? Would things have been different if she were bigger? In her restless state of mind, she reached out with a tentacle to caress the egg. The moment the tentacle touched the egg, she was surprised. Unidentified energy was absorbed from the tentacle's end into her body. It felt as though she had consumed a highly nutritious meal. A feeling of satiety washed over her, and her strength surged. This time feels a bit different, doesn't it? When I evolved into a metamorph from hatchling, I could feel the changes in my surroundings inside the egg, but this time was different. All my physical sensations were severed, and I stood alone in the darkness. As I looked down at my hand, a hand that now felt unfamiliar reached out to me. The clothing was the same as what I had worn before entering the world of space survival. It feels like my own imaginary world here. Looking around, there didn't seem to be any threatening elements. Just an endlessly vast, pitch-black space. It's a dark place, but it's familiar. In my childhood, whenever my parents argued, I would always hide under the bed or in the closet. If I plugged my ears and huddled there, I felt much more at ease. I'm reminded of the past. It's not a memory I want to dwell on. I shook my head to shake off unnecessary thoughts. I wonder how much time is left. In the game, it takes 6 hours to become a pre-saint. I don't know how long it will take in reality, but when I turned into a metamorph, there wasn't much difference from the game, so it should be similar this time. Why did the developers create it like this? Applying such a severe penalty to evolution, which is essential for morph operations. I can't understand it at all. In a game where real-time PK occurs for 24 hours, being incapacitated for 6 hours is a serious flaw, almost like a bug. Moreover, in a morph, cooperation is impossible, so it's impossible to ask your comrades to protect you during evolution. Unless you hide in a place where no one knows, most players are caught during evolution. Some players even hunt morphs exclusively. Especially because of me, there are many players who hate morphs, and some ruthless morph users have been attacked. Many morphs failed in evolution and were shot with anger shotguns. I also died a lot, caught by morph hunters during evolution. Failing in evolution doesn't have a specific penalty. It's just a hassle to find a hiding place again. Moreover, you have to wait a long time again, so it's impossible not to get annoyed. So, the morph hunters who disrupted evolution were even more terrifying than usual. Looking back, I was a bit harsh too. There was a time when a hunter recorded me being hunted and posted it on the community. The reaction at that time was explosive. To be precise, there was an overwhelming amount of resentment and criticism directed at me. People were saying all sorts of strange things like, how can a person do that? Or are you really an morph? Or I'll kill you, and so on. Sigh. Whether it's because of the magical influence of this pitch-black space, these unnecessary memories keep resurfacing. If I have the time, I shouldn't waste it and should use it wisely. There's a lot to do in the future, so I need to figure out where to start when I go out. Maybe I should think while walking. I took a step forward, and the ripples spread out as if I had placed my foot on the surface of the water. Starting with that, I aimlessly walked in the black void. After evolving, the first thing to deal with should be the wolves living next door and on the 5th floor. That should help resolve the issue with the transformed race to some extent. As I pondered how to approach the trading hub after evolving, something dark brown appeared and blocked my path. The entity that appeared in the black void was a metamorph stage amorph. I could tell that instinctively as soon as I saw it. This creature is the remnant of the amorph still present in my body. It seems that when I fell into this surreal world, the instincts of the amorph came with me. The creature growled as it revealed itself, but I wasn't particularly afraid. Instead, it felt strangely familiar. I reached out my hand to it. The creature, which had been growling threateningly, closed its mouth and lowered its head obediently. When my hand touched the creature's head, I woke up. Where am I? As soon as I opened my eyes, I was blocked by a thin wall. A soft and sticky film of blood enveloped me. Sensation returned to my body. At present, I was crouched over my body, wrapping my arms around it as if a baby was in the womb. My long tail was wrapped around my waist like a belt. When I released my combat arms and stood up, the plastic was torn apart with a ripping sound. A text box appeared in front of me on the Tornomorph. Race: unidentified aggressive space morph. Status: pre-saint. Objective: survive. Second, evolution successful. Possessed traits: physical related, applied type wings, chitinous exoskeleton, regeneration, fusion, neurotoxin glands, fusion, reinforced exoskeleton, acidic blood, enhanced reflexes, mimicry organ, fusion, serrated tentacles, contamination organ, spine projectile organ. Psychic-related, predator sense, fusion, human nature, monsters tentacles, and clairvoyance, psychic resistance. Type: physical enhancement type. You have received new unread messages. Would you like to read them? Messages. This was the first time I had received a message after evolving. There had been no such occurrences in the game before, so I accepted the request with curiosity. New system transcendence system unlocked. Would you like to see the instructions? A new system, it seems there are some changes. When I consumed psionium last time, no such messages appeared. It seemed that this new system was unlocked only through formal evolution. I chose to confirm, and a text box filled my vision. The Transcendence system allows you to combine 3 or more of your existing traits to create a completely new and unique trait, referred to as a unique trait. Available trait list: chitinous exoskeleton, reinforced exoskeleton, enhanced reflexes. Note: it's important to be aware that not all combinations will result in advantages, and there may be potential drawbacks. Transcendence system, Originally, in space survival, trait fusion was only possible one-on-one. So, for races that relied on traits, it was difficult to remember what traits they themselves had as the game progressed. I, too, had a hard time remembering them all because I had over 500 traits when I was about to see the ending. Even for someone like me who was a hardcore player, the system was so frustrating that I was trembling. But who would have thought they would revamp it like this? I never expected such a drastic overhaul of the system. What should I do? If it were a game, I would have accepted it immediately, but this was reality. A wrong decision could lead to great danger. If a new system I was not familiar with had been introduced, I needed to carefully assess and decide, just as the note suggested. Obtaining a unique trait has its merits. In space survival, there were no separate grades for traits. The efficiency of a trait varied greatly, depending on how someone used it. The only consensus was that fused traits were generally considered stronger to some extent. However, among those, there were special traits that outperformed others significantly. These are commonly referred to as unique traits. While it was difficult to obtain them, their performance was exceptional. But that doesn't mean there are no drawbacks. Unique traits were indeed very powerful, but they had one major drawback. While regular traits remained intact even if the character died, unique traits disappeared completely upon death. If you wanted to obtain a unique trait, you had to start from scratch. Therefore, when using unique traits, one had to be extremely cautious. But here, it's reality, so the drawback doesn't apply, right? After all, in reality, when you die, it's over. The fact that unique traits disappeared upon death was not a consideration. However, the reduction in the number of traits is a risk. The actual concern was not the drawback of the unique trait itself, but rather the overall number of traits. Currently, I have 11 physical-related traits. If 3 of them were removed, I wouldn't be able to meet the condition of having 10 for the physical enhancement type. You might think of first obtaining unique traits and then acquiring physical-related traits later, but there was a problem with that approach. Releasing a type in the middle doesn't remove the trait penalties. Currently, I had a penalty of 6 traits for the psychic enhancement type. If I were to regain the physical enhancement type after that, what would happen? Unfortunately, the penalty would be added, and the required number would increase from 6 to 12. Let's postpone the transcendent system. Physical-related traits were relatively easy to obtain. Honestly, the appeal of unique traits was strong, but in times like this, you had to be cautious. Choosing the safer path, even if it took a bit more time, would be beneficial. The moment to utilize the transcendent system would be after I had secured enough physical-related traits. I unlocked the text box and left the egg. Surely, I've grown quite a bit, having been on a spacious research vessel before, and now, in this small house, I could distinctly feel the difference in my body size. As I removed the eggshell pieces attached to my body, number 26 approached. Wow, ZZZZ, how have you been? That's the big baby from before. Isn't he going back this time? Yeah, I briefly transformed back then. The way he moved his tentacles seemed to express fascination. Huh, tentacles? Now that I look closely, number 26's appearance had indeed changed from before. The body, which was slightly smaller than a human head, had grown even larger. Moreover, 2 tentacles sprouted from the body. ZZZZZ, what's that? It's new. It appeared when the baby entered the egg. ZZZ, when I touched it while the baby was inside. When the child said that and lightly brushed its tentacles, a brief wave of purple energy emanated and then disappeared. Seeing this, I was certain of something. Sea demon. Those tentacles were probably serrated tentacles. They might seem small and cute compared to mine, but I knew what was hidden inside them. Sharp blades. If those tentacles swept across someone's face, the flesh would likely be torn away. But more importantly, I was curious. Why did it evolve suddenly? There didn't seem to be any specific trigger for it. I had monitored my surroundings with the auxiliary system during my time in the egg, but there were no special traces of any events happening around me. It said it touched the egg when I was in the middle of evolution, right? I wasn't sure about the exact cause, but it was possible that a portion of the energy generated during my evolution had been absorbed by it. Considering that the relationship between bubble amoebas and sea demons had not yet been clarified, this was just speculation. Now I can protect the baby, number 26 said confidently, and I affectionately petted it to express my approval. I had expected it, but it really happened. There was a time when I had contemplated whether to eat it or not, but now, such thoughts didn't cross my mind. Though it still looks weak, if it's a sea demon, it'll be helpful at full strength. The sea demon I saw was over 20 meters in size, and it had hundreds of tentacles. If a colossal monster that was treated as a mini-boss in games is following me, it will be incredibly helpful. I won't give up my genetic essence, but I should consider providing unnecessary food. Easy, then let's go eat. All right, I had just completed my evolution, and I felt a gnawing hunger. The child seemed hungry too, judging by its response. After all, it had only eaten a sandwich for over 6 hours. I carried number 26 on my shoulder and opened the door. The appetite-stimulating food was waiting next door. The administrative district of TNC Special Trade Center was unlike other areas saturated with artificial light from billboards. It embodied a different image, a life harmonizing with nature. As the slogan for the administrative district suggested, well-maintained trees and shrubs lined both sides of the marble sidewalks. Small birds chirped and flew among the trees. Beyond the refreshing forest of trees, white rectangular high-rise buildings rose prominently. These were the branch offices of prominent companies or government offices, including those for Megacorp. Passing through the beautiful but flat buildings, as one approached the center of the district, a building with a unique and towering design stood out more than any other in the surroundings. Its spiral exterior brought to mind a donut, and its upper section appeared as if two hands were spread wide open, embracing the cityscape. The majestic building was named Monument. True to the TNC family's emphasis on efficiency, even the symbol of the first space city bore a simple name: Monument. At the top floor of Monument, Layla Chamberlain, the youngest daughter of Sam Chamberlain and the overall manager of the Special Trade Center, currently resided. At that moment, she was in a meeting with the city's top officials. Layla and the heads of each district, as well as the team leaders of government offices, were seated around the mahogany table. Among them, only the deputy head of the Human Resources Management team stood nervously. Layla, a beautiful woman with long blonde hair, was reading a report when she spoke up. Human Resources Management team. Yes, ma'am. The incoming supplies have decreased by 3% this time. Can you determine the cause? In response to her question, the deputy head stammered, well, it's because Z101 Ranch Planet and P82 Livestock Planet reported reduced production this year. Our Special Trade Center can replace up to 20% of the hires destined for the entertainment district through alternative routes. However, a 3% decrease in the supply is by no means a small figure. We can't be complacent within the allowable range. But you see, it's just that. Everyone knows that 40% of the revenue in the Special Trade Center comes from the entertainment district. If the supply decreases by 3% from the Human Resources Management team, the burden will fall on the entertainment district side. Layla spoke calmly, but everyone understood the warning in her words. She was questioning why they hadn't opened new routes to fulfill the allocation quotas. Deputy Head, or should I say, Mr. Pissarro? Yes, ma'am. Do you know what's most important for a trader? It might be credits. Of course, credits are important, but the most crucial thing is trust. You can use difficulty in supply as an excuse this time due to certain circumstances. But what if it damages our reputation? These customers who have come here with great difficulty won't return if they're disappointed. I'll keep that in mind. Under normal circumstances, I might overlook this, but now is a critical time. You all know that the board meeting is approaching soon. When she mentioned the word board meeting, everyone in the room nodded with determined expressions. Anyone working under the TNC family would know. Not to mention how much the TNC family head desires the CEO position at Megacorp. The first phase of the board meeting is scheduled to be held right here in the TNC Special Trade Center. Enormous tourists will be visiting this city. There can't be the slightest margin for error. Understood. Contact the planetary authorities and make sure you meet the quota by any means necessary, even if you have to distribute aphrodisiacs across the entire planet. Do you understand? Yes. Now, next person. The entertainment district, is it? I'm always looking forward to this. Go ahead. Yes. While the deputy head sat down, wiping cold sweat, the representative from another team began their report. After 3 hours, the meeting came to an end. With all the team leaders gone, Layla sat alone in the conference room and let out a sigh. Sigh. There was just 1 month left until the first board meeting to select the Megacorp CEO. Although there was still time, she, as the overall manager, felt like she needed 10 more bodies. But if I can make this deal happen, the successor's position won't be just a dream. The TNC family had a unique feature that set them apart from other noble capitals. The precise name of TNC was Thompson and Chamberlain. They were called TNC because they took the initials from the surnames, T from Thompson and C from Chamberlain. As the name implied, within TNC, two families with different surnames coexisted in a single family. The family member who won in competition between the Thompson family and the Chamberlain family became the head of TNC. Currently, the Chamberlain family held the position of the head, but the next generation was uncertain. Thompson's side is making moves. Once one became the head, they could monopolize all the rights of the family and privileges related to TNC within Megacorp. Since the Chamberlains had held the position of the head for several generations, tensions were rising on the Thompson side. If Thompson were to take the next head position, there would surely be bloodshed. At that moment, the conference room door opened and a secretary entered. "Miss, here's a list of names from the individuals who have applied to visit on the board meeting day, as you mentioned." Layla checked the tablet pad handed to her by the secretary, scrolling through the names one by one. When she reached the last name, she was taken aback. "Is this list accurate?" "Yes." "Is there a problem?" "Akira Eugen is attending?" "Yes. The Eugen family contacted us an hour ago. They said he will only be doing city tours and won't be attending the board meeting." "Huh." Layla chuckled at the absurdity of it all. A centuries-old, noble, casually touring the city. It was an uninteresting joke. Akira Eugen, the current Megacorp CEO, is coming here. Layla was well aware of his legacy and notoriety, often referred to as the usurper. Usurper. Layla casually mentioned Akira, Eugen's nickname. Usurper was a term he despised, used by other noble capitals to mock him. As his nickname suggests, Akira Eugen wasn't originally meant to become the head. His name itself indicated that he had no qualifications to inherit the family. The Eugen family places great importance on lineage. The 5 major noble capitals each had their own defining factors. The TNC valued competition. The Eugen family placed importance on lineage. The Garamelda family was known for technological advancements in terraforming, and so on. They all had guiding principles that matched their respective fields. Akira, as befitting a lineage-focused family, became the head due to his bloodline tracing back to the traditional roots of their people. In an era of constant terraforming, they still cling to their ethnicity. She couldn't understand it, but in any case, Akira's bloodline was distant from the Eugen family's true roots, so he wasn't the official heir. The reason he became the head was simple. He was the only person in the history of the Eugen family, or any noble capital for that matter, to become the head through a coup d'état. Yongwu Eugen was it. Originally, he was supposed to smoothly run the family, but he was the unfortunate head who was removed by Akira. After his death, all his descendants met a miserable end. Moreover, that insane nobleman Akira even turned Yongwu Eugen's daughter into a shadow. The reason Akira Eugen earned a reputation for cruelty wasn't solely because he killed people indiscriminately. It was because he didn't spare his fellow nobles, members of the same family. He would kill or torture them without hesitation, which drew criticism. Layla herself enjoyed hunting humans on the ranch planet every year, but she didn't needlessly harm her family's assets. In that regard, Akira could be considered an aberration among the noble capitals. The reason this eccentric managed to maintain the position of head of the family, despite not fitting the noble capital image, was his competence. It was a sad affair for Yongwu Eugen, but after his death, the Eugen family prospered unusually well. Layla, being in a position of authority, understood that ruling with fear was not easy. She might not be able to handle the monster who had ruled the Eugen family for nearly a century. A formidable opponent. As her father struggled against him, it was highly likely that she would be brutally crushed if she attempted to confront Akira directly. No, failure is the foundation of growth. Even if I lose to him, I can use it as an experience. As an heir of the TNC family, she wasn't afraid of competition and challenges. She believed that, with plenty of time ahead, she could recover from any setback. But did she truly understand? The fact that a terrible danger was already taking root in her territory. ZZZZ tasty. Yep. Compared to the cyborg's house, the neighboring one had a distinctly lived-in feel. The furniture was tidy, and it seemed like they cleaned regularly as the entire house was spotless. The fridge was stocked with food, including artificial meat sandwiches and dried vegetables. I looked at number 26, who was diligently emptying the fridge with a satisfied expression. I'm hungry too. When I saw the owner of a neighboring house, whose waist had been severed by a tail, I couldn't help but want to tear into that fresh flesh. But there were still things to be done. I quickly finished the sandwich number 26 had taken out of the fridge and got up from my seat. Zzz, I'll be going next door for a bit. Okay, be careful, baby duh. Once I entered the cyborg's house, I looked for his communication device. I turned on the communication device lying next to the bed and entered the password. Let's see, office number. As I scrolled through the saved contacts, one name caught my eye. Crazy Bastard. This must be it. Every office worker tends to have a love-hate relationship with their boss. I pressed the name Crazy Bastard. As soon as the signal went through, the other party picked up. You lunatic Ras. Why aren't you here when you're supposed to be working? I'm off duty. What? Are you insane? Have a good day. You crazy son of a... Using the mimicry function of the mimicry organ, I ended the call and pressed the disconnect button. Here, countless extraterrestrial laborers come in every day, every hour. Even if one of them quits for no apparent reason, there are plenty of people to replace them. While it's possible to develop deep bonds with colleagues at work, it doesn't seem to be the case for the owner of my voice, Ras. His reactions as a team leader and the way he keeps to himself, when you look at his contacts and call history, suggest he's more of a loner. Maybe he'll be forgotten once today is over. Just like the harbor worker I devoured before, Ras will likely be forgotten. But it's probably best to finish things properly. I opened the laptop that was in the living room. If I send a resignation email from his work laptop, it shouldn't cause too much trouble. It could be handled over the phone, but just in case. Maybe later, when I've devoured more people, I won't have to worry, but for now, I should be cautious. It's a wealthy space city with a significant presence of androids and a small, but well-equipped defense fleet station here. Compared to the research ship I was on before, it's much more spacious, offering plenty of hiding places. However, the surveillance network here is incredibly detailed, unlike anything I've seen before. I still need to be cautious. It's best to avoid getting caught for as long as possible after I've devoured someone. I won't be able to hide it forever, but I should delay it as much as possible until I become strong enough. So, let's see who this person is. To send an email, I need to know roughly who the person is, so I started examining the files on the laptop one by one. The owner of the laptop, Ras, doesn't seem to have led a particularly diligent life for a cyborg. Despite being a work laptop, it's filled with non-work-related content. Being a workaholic in the space age is very rare. I had no interest in the cyborg's sexual preferences, so I deleted the irrelevant files. I continued to open and close files while inspecting them when I noticed a peculiarly titled file. Smuggling Animal Surveillance Team Seizure List. As I clicked on the file, the monitor filled with dense text. As the name suggests, it contained a list of seizures related to animals smuggled with the aim of trafficking. Smuggled animals, huh? Even a cursory glance showed that there were many different kinds. Most of them had already been transported to other planets, but there were still a considerable number of creatures left here on the Port Earth. If I consumed these, I could gain a substantial amount of genetic essence. While this apartment can be considered a decent hunting ground, it's not as abundant as the smuggled animals at the Port Earth. Devouring just half of those creatures would significantly aid my growth. But surveillance won't be easy to overcome. If the animals I'm managing suddenly disappear, anyone with half a brain would figure it out pretty quickly. If they report it to the police and an investigation starts, it's going to be a big problem. So there are two options: hiring employees or finding a smuggled animal broker. Hiring employees isn't particularly difficult. Since I can mimic Ras with my artificial body, I can just call in another employee. After devouring that employee and forging the transport documents myself, I can probably get away with swiping a few of them easily. But if I want to devour more than that, I'll need a broker. Looking at the list, there were ambiguously filled sections where the destination of the creatures was left blank. This is probably where the broker intervened. It's probably best to either intercept the broker and steal the creatures or devour the broker and mimic their role to seize my prey. I should make good use of Rass's identity. He left behind a lot when he died. It's a shame. It would have been much more enjoyable if he had tasted better. After sending the email, I took the laptop and returned to the neighboring apartment. Hey, come here quickly, baby. ZZZZ. Hey, ZZ. I won't eat that. You shouldn't be picky about your food. ZZZZZ. I'm going to eat something else. Something else. ZZZ. ZZZZ. Yes. You eat it. Number 26 blinked its lights as if it didn't understand my words. I nodded to indicate that I was okay, and it cautiously began devouring the man next door. As I watched the man's face melting under number 26's influence, I thought to myself, something even tastier is waiting for me. I savored the anticipation of the pleasure of consuming genetic essence. Let's handle this before we go out. While number 26 was feasting on the man's brain, there were things to be done. I cut off the man's ankles and put them in the refrigerator. Once Rass's role is finished, I'll assume this person's form. The mimicry organ is a characteristic that allows me to consume flesh, analyze genes, and mimic. I don't need to eat all of the meat, like when activating the predation effect. I don't need to store all of it, so I'll just keep a part. Putting it in the refrigerator might slow down the decay process a bit. Even so, it would be unrealistic for it to last more than 2 days. After disposing of the body, I took out the communication device. Next, I contemplated who to call. Looking at my contacts, Rass's human relationships were extremely limited. Besides the team leader, there didn't seem to be anyone who might know a broker. The team leader would be a burden. Just like on the research vessel, being the head of a government office in a space city would classify one as at least a mid-capitalist. Even if we were being conservative, he would be a mid-capitalist, and if he belonged to a higher stratum, he might be a third capitalist, a figure entirely different from someone like Rass, who could easily be replaced. If that person disappears, they'll know right away. The current situation is different from when I killed Kaisaraji Yujin. She's a high-ranking noble capital, far above the people on the research vessel. Megacorp is a competitive society, but at the same time, it's a rigid, pyramid-shaped society where social mobility is stagnant, a contradictory organization. The higher up in the capital hierarchy, the more ruthless they tend to be in keeping those below from moving up. Noble capital, positioned at the very top of the Megacorp pyramid, is even more extreme in this regard. As a result, everyone feared retaliation from noble capital, and they could only passively respond to her sudden death. Their timid response ultimately brought great misfortune upon them. It's ironic. The death of the person in the highest position is hidden, while the death of the lower-ranking person is revealed. Furthermore, the smuggling animal surveillance team seemed quite busy. Amidst this, if the person in charge were to disappear, it would create chaos. I needed to choose someone else. This person doesn't seem right, neither does this one. While checking the messages on the communication device, there was one contact that appeared particularly frequently. The messages were simple, just asking if they were going to the office after work today, but this contact had exchanged the most messages with Rass. Well, this person should do. The person's name is Lloyd. He was a friend who shared a secret hobby with Rass. When you mention the office in the Special Tray Hub, it was famous even in online communities. It was a place that vividly showcased a dark, dystopian worldview, and it was often mentioned in the news due to its controversial ethics. Anyway, people who enjoy such morally questionable entertainment might know about the broker. Lloyd and Rass seem pretty close. I thought as I used my small arms to send a message to Lloyd. Hey, let's catch up sometime. You quit your job? You crazy bastard, you're going all out. What happened? I got tired of the endless workload. I'm looking for work elsewhere. Work here is a bit crappy. Where are you going? I've only learned this, so what else can I do? I'll find something similar. Similar work? Yeah, like smuggling. It felt like I had brought up the topic abruptly, but there was no other way. I didn't know how Rass usually expressed his intentions, and the longer the conversation, the more room there was for misunderstandings. I better keep it short and to the point. As soon as I sent the message, there was no immediate response from the other end. After a few minutes, the communication device beeped again. You said you weren't going to do anything dangerous before, didn't you? It seemed that Lloyd had talked to Rass about smuggling once before, and Rass had probably declined at that time. I thought about it again, and there's really no other way to make money. You're hopeless. Now you want to do what everyone else does. Well, I have to give it a try now. All right, I'll send you the information via email. Why not meet up today and talk about it? Meet up? Yeah, there's a bar I know in the Harbor District. You're not that type, are you? You buying drinks? I just retired, and I can afford a drink with my colleagues, can't I? You retired and grew some balls, huh? Okay, what time do you want to meet? Honestly, I was a bit impulsive, but Lloyd didn't seem to have any suspicions, so it went well. Things are going smoothly. I sent him a message with the location and time. The location was an alley near the border of the Harbor District, as close as possible to the manhole connected to the underground secret passage. We decided on the evening for the meeting. In this city, whether it's day or night, there are always people around, but the presence or absence of bright lights makes a world of difference. To move discreetly in the darkness and keep a low profile, it was natural to meet at night. I should catch them after they've finished work. I sent the message, and a reply came quickly. Since he had retired, he mentioned that he might get bored if he went to the office alone. No need to be bored. After all, he would probably end up on the same path as Rass. I got confirmation. There was still plenty of time until evening. Taking genetic essence from this apartment was risky, so I had to spend time here. I'm full. Looking at number 26, it seemed like it had eaten to the point of bursting. It waddled over to the soft bed and fell asleep. It's still young, so it should sleep a lot. After covering him with a blanket, I opened my laptop again. Before meeting Lloyd, I needed to go over the list and gather information. Carefully examining the list, I checked off multiple seized specimens of the same type of organism. Since the predatory effect activates by probability, having more of the same species is better. As I checked, there were truly all sorts of organisms. They were all creatures I'd seen at least once in the game, but some of them made me suspicious of whether they were really trying to smuggle them. There's even a mountain crawler. How did they manage to capture one? And, as I marveled at the skills of the smugglers while looking at the list, I noticed an unusual name. They captured an outspacer. Hastily, I checked the entry next to the name, and the transport section was left blank. That meant the outspacer was still here. There are 20 of them. It would have been great if there was a queen among them, but since it wasn't specified, it seemed like there were only workers. Even so, it was a significant harvest for me. Outspacer genes can be useful. The outspacers, as the name suggests, are extraterrestrial species from beyond the stars. They gather genes to enhance themselves and exhibit many similarities to the amorphs, such as genetically strengthening and antagonizing different species. The key differences are that, unlike the amorphs, players control them in colony units rather than individual entities, and among outspacers of the same species, cooperation and communication are possible. In simple terms, if amorphs are inspired by X-Files, outspacers are inspired by classic Game Zerg. I had played Outspacer for quite a long time, given my fascination with extraterrestrial creatures. In essence, they're an upgraded version of amorphs. When a player chooses Outspacer, their main goal is to become the colony queen of that species and grow the colony. Absorbing genes from other creatures reflects in the offspring produced by the queen. The Outspacers operated with a typical monarch-type mechanism where the workers became stronger, gathering more powerful genes and growing the colony. Compared to the amorphs, another monarch-type species with a brutal hierarchy, the Outspacers were regarded as a challenging and high-potential species within the community. What set them apart was the ability for players to develop entirely different forms of colonies based on their choices. In terms of performance, they quickly became powerful after surviving the initially high difficulty, making them popular among players who value performance over concept. Still, I prefer amorphs. If you played as amorphs, it was a good idea to acquire Outspacer genes whenever the opportunity arose. This was because they had many useful traits, and some are even related to acquiring new types. Let's start with these guys. Although there were only 20 of them, since I would be devouring them as live specimens rather than samples, I could expect the predation effect to work in my favor. Besides, I checked one or two other useful prey items. Unfortunately, Due to the nature of smuggling, there weren't many cases where more than 10 of the same species were brought in. I might not get many traits, even if I devour them all. This aspect probably depended on luck. As I selected the things to consume, the room gradually became shrouded in darkness. The time for hunting prey was drawing near. I woke up number 26, and together we left the apartment. A somber darkness had descended over the entire city. Streetlights illuminated the dark residential area brightly. Last time, there were people around, so I had to break the streetlights, but late at night, there were patrols of police officers around the residential area. Before, I had to break the streetlights to avoid their gaze, but if I kept doing that, it would surely raise suspicion. Today, I should try to avoid them rather than destroying the streetlights. I moved between the closely spaced apartment buildings, leaping over them through the rooftops and outer walls. While the gaps between the apartments were significant, thanks to the enhanced agility trait, it wasn't a major issue to leap long distances. When landing, I spread the wings on my back to make as little noise as possible. It's fortunate that there are fewer people because it's work time. Moving quickly, I soon approached the manhole cover. It was right in front of me, but I didn't rush to it. Instead, I concealed myself. Why are you acting this way, little one? ZZZ, enemy. Enemy. There was an android patrolling around the manhole. A combat android. Unlike the android I saw on the pirate ship last time, this one had 3 arms. In addition to 2 arms resembling those of a human, there was an additional combat-oriented right arm equipped with a Gauss rifle near its waist. That's strange. An android using a Gauss rifle. The Gauss rifle is a high-powered weapon that falls below plasma weapons in terms of firepower, making it highly efficient against heavily armored foes. To put in perspective, it's like a less expensive but less destructive version of a plasma weapon. However, just like plasma weapons, Gauss rifles are costly equipment for regular soldiers or androids to use. The cost of a single rifle is higher than lower-tier powered armor, and, most importantly, the ammunition is exceptionally expensive. It uses tungsten ammunition, so it's bound to be expensive. Anyway, the level of armament I was aware of for androids was by no means as high as this. Even if this city is wealthy, it's not so affluent as to equip a single android with a Gauss rifle that consumes high-cost tungsten ammunition like water unless it's an extraordinarily special situation. Could there be some kind of event or festival? TNC Special Trade Center was a place where various in-game events were held. Given that it was a city frequented by tourists, it wouldn't be unusual for an unknown festival to be taking place. If a festival was happening, it would naturally mean a higher level of alert and security with a significant influx of visitors. The reason for the androids being heavily armed might be related to the festival. I guess I should consider myself lucky and unlucky at the same time. I made it in safely, but of all times, it had to be when a festival was scheduled. While lost in thought, the heavily armed android loitering around the manhole disappeared somewhere. After waiting for a moment and confirming that no one else was approaching, I approached the manhole. I lifted the incredibly heavy piece of metal effortlessly with my human strength and sent number 26 in first. After a final look around, I entered the manhole as well. As I touched the manhole cover, a pitch-black darkness, like a black hole with not a speck of light, enveloped us. Baby, where are we going? ZZZZZZ. We'll go the way we came. The little guy and I had no trouble seeing in the dark. It sensed air currents, vibrations, and other such things with its entire body, and I had an auxiliary system. I could see it. A small tunnel, about 5 meters high, stretched all the way to the other side of the ground. Inside the tunnel, there was discarded trash from past labors, cigarette butts thrown by someone from above the manhole cover, and more scattered on the floor. From the tunnel walls, dust periodically fell due to vibrations caused by passing subway trains. I walked toward our destination with number 26. Let's lay down spores on the way. Originally, I planned to lay down spores after establishing a nest, but things were different when there was a festival in the city. Setting up surveillance in advance would make it easier to deal with unexpected situations. When I activated the contamination organ on the lower right arm of my combat arm, a viscous brown mucus mixed with spores oozed out. The spores I had released slowly spread through the tunnel, as if reassuring me that they wouldn't worry about leaving my body. Since the contamination organ also had the enhancement effect, in about 2 days, the spores would grow as effectively as if I had built the nest myself. That should do for surveillance. By the time most of the spores were laid down on the path connecting the residential and harbor zones, I arrived at my destination. I carefully opened the manhole cover and checked outside. Nobody here either. This area was the border between zones, and it seemed people didn't frequent it. If you wanted to go to another zone, you would take the subway rather than walk. ZZ, wait here. Why? I want to go with you, Dot. ZZ, they'll get scared of you. I recalled that Ras had been scared of number 26, and he crouched down gloomily. It was a sad truth that people were afraid of number 26. I hid number 26 under the manhole and went to the meeting place. They hadn't arrived yet. I activated the mimicry organ and crouched in a dark alley. They're coming. About 10 minutes had passed since I started waiting. Someone was walking toward me from a distance.